Planning Sustainability Committee, Tuesday, February, what day are we on? The 9th. I'm Councilman Tony Brancatelli, Chairman of the Development Planning Sustainability Committee. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Brancatelli.
Present.
Hairston.
Present.
Cleveland. Griffin. Bashir Jones. McCormick.
Present.
Slife.
Present.
Mr. Chairman, you have a quorum.
Thank you very much. This Development Planning Sustainability Committee hearing is being held during the COVID-19 an emergency declaration in accordance with Ohio's open meeting laws as amended by HB 404. This meeting is being held using the Zoom platform and is being live streamed on YouTube and on Cleveland's Channel 20. It also can be seen on Cleveland City Council website and from City Council's Facebook page. In accordance with Ohio open meetings regulations as amended by HB 404, notice of this committee hearing was publicly posted. This committee hearing will be conducted as all committee hearings in accordance with the council rules and Robert's Rules of Order. The chair will facilitate the meeting and call on persons to speak. If you wish to speak, please use the raise your hand option on Zoom, and please limit your comments to the matters before today's committee. As is usual practice, any actions to be voted on during this committee will be done by voice vote, called and recorded by the committee clerk as required by Rule 15. We only have one piece of legislation, which we'll be hearing for the next few days, Ordinance 73, 2021. An emergency ordinance authorizing the Director of Community Development to apply for and accept grants from the United States Development of Housing and Urban Development for fiscal year 2021 under the Title I of the Housing and Community Development Act of 1974. For the 2021 Federal Home Initiative Investment Partnerships Act Program, Emergency Solutions Grant Program, and the Housing Opportunities for Persons with AIDS Program, and authorizing contracts and other expenditures. So we have 3 days of CDBG hearings. And with that, I will turn it over to Director Wacker.
All right, so just remember to turn my mute off. Good morning, Chairman and members of the council. We look forward to today to presenting what community development does with these resources in the city of Cleveland. It's a tremendously important resource that we have, at least from my perspective, the privilege to try and put to good use throughout the city. I do want to introduce really quickly the commissioners I have on the presentation with me today. So we have Commissioner of Neighborhood Development, James Green, Commissioner of Neighborhood Services, Louise Jackson, and Commissioner of Administrative Services, Joy Anderson should be joining us shortly. As we go throughout the presentation, we'll go more in depth there she is, more in depth with their teams and their managers and their programming. But I want to make sure just to highlight them right off the bat. They do probably the bulk of the work that our department does day in and day out. They make sure that what we are doing is done well, that we are having an impact, and their work really can't go unrecognized. So I want to make sure that is clear. I also want to make very clear that the people that work under them work day in and day out, even in the last year in sort of very trying circumstances, to try and do not only their normal job, but have had to step up and do above and beyond what is their normal job. The department has had a unique year where we've had influxes of resources that we have previously not seen, at least in over a decade since the last recession. And hopefully when we go through our presentation, you can get a sense that we are putting it to good use, and also get a sense of how our department is in effect, hopefully a good investment. With that, I'm going to go through my opening statement. Do I have privileges to share my screen?
Madam Clerk, can you please allow share screen?
You should have it.
Okay, thank you. All right. All right. Very good. Thank you, members of the committee. So over the past year, this has been a sort of an unparalleled year for the Department of Community Development. Traditionally, the city of Cleveland receives 4 entitlement grants: Community Development Block Grant, also known as CDBG, a Home Investment Partnership, also known as HOME, Emergency Solutions Grants, which deals with homelessness and people at risk of homelessness. It goes under the acronym of ESG. And then Housing for Persons with HIV/AIDS, also known as HOPWA. Together, these federal programs represent approximately 29 to 30 million in resources that the city receives each year. And we work to invest those in low and moderate income neighborhoods to benefit low and moderate income residents and to address issues of slum and blight throughout the city. So this is a sort of a simplified graph of what CDBG can be used for, but all our other programs and funding sources sort of follow a similar model, and that there are certain national objectives that you have to meet. And primarily it's broken between low and moderate objectives, so area benefits, limited clientele, meaning benefiting persons directly, benefiting low and mod housing, and benefiting and creating opportunities for people to access employment or economic opportunities on their jobs. And then we also address slum and blight issues. So either on an area basis, based on the conditions of neighborhoods, or on a spot basis to address issues on a particular location. HUD also allows in certain circumstances urgent need investments, but typically those are done under a federal emergency declaration. So since 1975, the city of Cleveland has received a total of $1.2 billion in CDBG funding, $177.9 million in home funding, and $23 million HOPWA funds, and $47.7 million in ESG funding. In total, these represent more, along with program income that we recapture and with leveraged funding, more than $2 billion in invested resources throughout the city of Cleveland over the last 45 years. The graph here shows the change in funding levels for the CDBG program, which is the sort of the most funding that we get each year. It peaked out in the early 80s at around $40 million a year and has slowly declined since then. But in recent years, we've seen these numbers sort of tick up a little bit. And most notably this past year, we've had a significant influx of CDBG funding through the CARES Act, which is shown by that spike up at the right side of the chart. With the onset of the pandemic, the Department of Community Development's resources have been augmented by $27.5 million in CARES Act funding from CARES Act CDBG funding. We've also received $11.3 million in ESG funding and a small grant for HOPWA, a little over $200,000. We've also received, for the first time, CARES Act funding through the U.S. Department of Treasury to fund emergency rental assistance funding. We received $11.3 million in rental assistance funding just this past month. And with the new Biden fiscal package that might pass Congress, there's more rental assistance funding that's included in that. And we expect we would receive another infusion as a result. Combine this with the city's investment in food and rental assistance, which was done through reconciliation with the council and the mayor recently, $5 million. Investments in housing right to counsel for families facing eviction, lead safe housing fund, a lead safe fund of $5 million, and the Healthy Homes Initiative, as well as the restarting of the paint program. The city has been working with a total budget this past year of nearly $80 million. That's almost triple what we typically see in a normal grant year. This is a tremendous increase and a tremendous responsibility at a time when it's certainly been needed most. I'm happy to report that the increase in funding is resulting in a corresponding increase in activity throughout the city of Cleveland. For example, in our program year of July 1st, 2019 to June 30th, 2020, the department has expended 33.2 million in federal funds. In the first 6 months of the current program year, July 1st, 2020 to December 31st, 2020, the department has expended 24.2 million in federal funds. So in 6 months, we've almost spent as much funding as we spent in the previous 12 months. Our department is on pace to expend 150% of what was expended in 2019, and we expect to finish 2020 program year possibly above 200% of what we would typically spend. On the screen here, it shows sort of the breakdown of where the pots of funding are coming from and where what we are moving through our system. On the left-hand side, you see the most recent completed grant year, which is program year 2019, with the 32 million that has been expended. And on the right-hand side, you see the first 6 months of the program year 2020, which shows 20 million has been expended through our various programs. And we'll go into more detail as we talk through each program individually throughout the next 3 days. Now, what have we accomplished with these funds? Looking at accomplishments during this period, the department can report 108,000 individual accomplishments across all programs in program year 2019. That was for over a course of 12 months with $30 million. Now, in this current fiscal year, grant year, we have 113,000 accomplishments that we can report just in the first 6 months of 2020. So we've already exceeded the number of accomplishments that we did for all of 2019. Our programs each reach every corner of the city. If you compare the map of all accomplishments from 2019, which on the screen, 2019 is the left-hand side. It's the more orange sort of pins versus 2020, which has more pins that are sort of purple. Purple represents the CARES Act funding. You can see that it's a true testament to the hard work performed by department staff and our partners in the field. And this is at a time when a lot of organizations, not including the city, have had to adjust to the realities of the pandemic and how to deliver these services in a new environment. The screen on the left represents a total impact of 192 million. So that 30 million that we invest, we can tabulate the impact on the community. So in terms of projects, what we have leveraged or what benefits have been realized. So that 30 million represents 192 million of impact. And then on the right-hand side, in 2020, the first half of 2020 alone, we already tabulated 197 million of community impact. These accomplishments are generated through the 15 programs that the department administers. These programs really span a large array of activities. They stem from housing rehabs to a large-scale multifamily developments. They stem from public services of giving people food aid and assistance to a small after-school program. Now we're seeing a lot of programs and delivery through web-based and Zoom services. And also our network of CDCs and all the good work that they do in reaching out throughout their neighborhoods and communities to help businesses and help residents get the various services and assistance they need. We are generating accomplishments by partnering with over 60 partners who are subrecipients that expand our capacity to deliver much needed programs and services throughout the city. The department, conservatively, the total impact of these accomplishments as this year has reached almost 200 million. This represents not just the funding invested in by these department programs, but the total program and project costs or leverage resources. Federal funding is fairly flexible, but they tend to have fairly inflexible and rigorous reporting and accountability requirements. It is not enough to fund a program. We need to know who is benefiting and if they are eligible for assistance. When programs are properly designed and executed, you not only have programs that are targeted, but there's important information to be gained about the needs of the community. However, when programs and projects do not have a strong design control, that focus on how to achieve accomplishments poses real reporting challenges. HUD has a pass-fail method for reporting accomplishments. Either all the data points are collected and you receive full credit, or the program receives zero credit for the work that does not generate reportable accomplishments. This is a constant challenge that we are addressing, and one that we work diligently with our partners in order to provide technical assistance and training so they can understand how to realize those accomplishments. It's not simply that you are in the community doing good work. Unfortunately, you have to justify the good work that you're doing and report it with measurable metrics to HUD. The coming year will be very important for the department. We are required to submit a new 5-year consolidated plan. A 5-year consolidated plan details how the city intends to invest its entitlement funds between the period of 2021 and 2026. HUD wants to see that the city has identified areas of need and that we are coordinating our response with not just the use of federal funds, but with other resources as well. That we are developing an outline for the 5-year consolidated plan, and generally we are focusing on 4 priority areas. On the screen, you'll see the table, which sort of gives you the outline of the new 5-year plan and the 4 focus areas. The 4 focus areas are the 10-year housing plan, economic opportunity, ending systemic poverty and desperate outcomes, and neighborhood public facilities. So in this graph, you'll see the left hand is sort of the overarching goals, and then under those, or to the right of those, are the specific strategies that we want to implement or are working on in order to support those focus areas. So under the 10-year housing plan, which is being developed now, and there'll be much more opportunity for input, we have strategic initiatives, which include, Mayor's Neighborhood Transformation Initiative, the Lead Safe Coalition efforts, the Fact 50 efforts for Clark Fulton, neighborhood revitalization strategy areas, and how we can use that to help our housing initiatives, demolition and board up, Project Clean, citywide grants, CDC activity grants, our banking relations efforts, and community reinvestment initiatives, our safe housing initiatives, our affordable housing expansion and preservation initiatives, supporting housing infill and development. Those all fall under sort of the 10-year housing plan. Housing is a big, important component in what these federal funds are intended to be used for, which is why we have a lot. And also, there is a lot of activity in the community that we want to support as a result. Then the last 3, sort of the economic opportunity. We have storefront renovation program, which is a tremendously successful program. And as you'll learn this year, has really undertaken some changes that have really resulted in some significant benefits and activity. Also, how do we use our land bank for economic development initiatives? How do we use the city's capacity to take out Section 108 loans for economic development initiatives? Our public service, what opportunities do you have for public service workforce initiatives? And finally, again, banking relations. Because banking relations and community investment initiatives don't just deal with housing, but we would like to focus on small business as well, making sure that small neighborhood style businesses have access to the credit and financing that they need. Ending systemic poverty and desperate outcomes. Again, this sort of is focused on our at-risk populations, primarily supporting the cities and counties' continuum of care. The continuum of care is the city's homelessness initiative, and how do we make sure that people who are at risk of homelessness do not become homeless, or if they do become homeless, how we can make it as short an experience as possible. And then public services to address our neighborhood revitalization strategy areas. Public services to address some focus areas: systemic poverty, youth violence, poverty, and accessibility among the elderly. Also housing for persons with HIV/AIDS, and then finally, how our land bank can be used to as a resource to support permanent supportive housing. This is, if you're familiar with the city's Housing First initiatives, this is sort of an important component to that. And then finally, this neighborhood public facilities. There are a number of facilities throughout the city that are very important. First and foremost, obviously, the community gardens is an important activity that occurs every year in, year out, through our community, from our Summer Sprouts program. The city also manages some very important facilities: North Point Homeless Shelter, the May Dugan Services Shelter on the west side, 5 Points on the east side. And then finally, how does land bank, again, as having land as a resource, how that can be used to support neighborhood public facilities, either through public park or green space creation, or creating neighborhood connections for walkable neighborhoods. All right, that was a lot to cover in, but I think it gives you a snapshot of where we're trying to go and what we're trying to do. And also, it just gives you an idea of the breadth and scope of the issues we're working on and where we're trying to invest our money.
Great, incredibly comprehensive. And I know these are the details we have to manage virtually every day when it comes to working with our CDCs and our service providers and making sure we're checking the appropriate boxes. And I know we're going to talk about this later, but you know, the new online platform for turning in your reports, and as much as it's been a challenge and exercise in making sure we understand how we're reporting, it's also updating how we manage our way through. So there was a couple of hands raised on the opening remarks. Councilman Joe Jones.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. To the director, can you make available a copy of this? I don't have this in my notes.
This was sent out to all the council members already, and it's also in the Dropbox.
When was this sent out?
Joe, I think you sent this out yesterday, or?
Yeah, that's the problem.
Yesterday or the day before.
Yeah.
That's the problem. Getting at the last minute, you think you got
these are all put in the Dropbox that we all have access to.
Yeah, I understand, but I'm just saying I don't have it right now. So when he was going through it, but that's good that we do got it. So thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll look in the Dropbox. Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you, Councilman Polensek. Unmute yourself, Councilman.
Can you hear me?
We got you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, my honorable colleagues, and to the director. I haven't had the pleasure to sit down with the director yet. I know he's a new guy on the block, but I wanted to go back to his opening comments and just touch on a few. You indicated, Director, that the total block grant money that we have received is $1 billion since 1975. Is that correct?
Correct. 1.2 billion in community development block grant funds.
And then the other funds, that you mentioned would give us a grand total of what?
The other funding, so home funds, which started in the 90s, you know, to date, total is around 177 million. The ESG, which is our homelessness funding, also started in the early 90s, is around, 47 million. And then HAPA also began in the 90s as this 23 million.
Okay. My question is this to you and to the department. In light of all the funds that we have received over the years, I've always looked at the low and mod maps, and then there was low and mod maps, and I'm trying to think of what the other designation was, that maps that were put out by the department over the years. We have seen the low and mod populations just expand across the entire city, and the distressed communities expand across the city. So in light of that, has the department I'm trying to how to best describe this. Have you really stopped and stepped back for a moment and looked at what has worked and what hasn't worked? Because, you know, I'm dealing with more quality of life issues today than I ever have, dealing with more poverty and despair than I ever have, dealing with more abandoned homes and properties than I ever have. And yet, you know, we look at the amount of money that is coming to the city of Cleveland, and I keep asking myself, in light of all that, you would have thought we would have had far greater success in stabilizing our neighborhoods, and helping low and mod and families in distress than we have. And I want to just add to that again, our population obviously has dropped substantially since 1975, probably about 300,000. So it's not like we're dealing with more people, we're dealing with less people, and yet we have this pot of money. And then you've mentioned about the mayor's initiative. And again, the challenge that I see with that, director, and to my honorable colleagues, you know, it's focused around Cleveland Clinic, it's focused around UH, it's focused around Metro. So, and I've heard the term used, you know, the city is going after the low hanging fruit. And I could understand that if case of the clinic, if the clinic was putting in a substantial amount of money to match the mayor's initiative. But to my knowledge, I've been told that the clinic hasn't put in any funds into that pot. So I guess I want to hear from you, because you're the new guy in the block. Where do we go from here? I mean, I see abandoned house. I represent part of East Glenville. I see all the abandoned houses, the houses that are in need of repair, elderly who can't maintain their homes anymore, working poor families who can't maintain their homes. I see the poverty and distress, and it troubles me greatly. I was born in the Glenville neighborhood, raised in Collinwood. So I see the same thing in portions of Collinwood, but yet there's been this massive flow of dollars into the city. And it seems like we haven't been able to stem the tide of the poverty, the distress. Now, there's some neighborhoods we know on the west side that have come back, quote unquote, the trendy neighborhoods. But for the east side, for the most part, I have not seen that. So would you care to comment? I mean, again, I think there has to be some look-see. What have we done that's worked, and what hasn't worked, and what can we do to start correcting what hasn't worked?
Yes, Councilman, thanks to the chair. Those are very big questions, very important questions. I think those are the questions that need to be asked every single day. If I have to give you a response, there's a couple of things. You know, the 30 million, and I know I provide you some big numbers, but again, that 30 million in the scope of the needs throughout the city is really scratching the surface in many ways. You know, we know that in terms of property transactions or lending transactions that we see throughout the county, you know, the city of Cleveland probably does not see around 300 million in lending that other communities outside the county would see. You know, if we're at a deficit of 300 million each year, that builds every year, that's not being invested in housing, used to maintain housing. Those deferred investments build up over time. That 30 million can't fill that $300 million hole so easily. That said, you know, I think before this year, I would have really articulated more the need of more money above all else. I think this year is really brought to the forefront. If you bring more money to the table, that is part of the solution, but the other part of the solution is that you need the capacity. So you need the people and the boots on the ground to actually implement that, which is why it's so important the city of Cleveland have so many partners in investing these monies throughout the city. But more importantly, our programs designed in a way to facilitate the market's in our neighborhoods. And I don't want to say facilitate markets, because I think that in a way that would gentrify markets, but in a way that makes sure that people who live in these neighborhoods have access to what households in outside of Cleveland have access to, so they can refinance their home, they can get a home equity loan, they can make improvements on their home. There's a lot of activity that we do, and I've really learned this through our banking relations initiatives. There was a study done, as you might hear, with Aisha Weeks later this week, and how appraisals happen in the city of Cleveland, and where most transactions in the city of Cleveland, even if we put our money and we put gap financing into a project, is still not considered a comp for the purposes of appraising other properties. And what I mean by that is we might invest in a house, but because the transaction was not listed on a multiple listing service, there weren't photos of the interior of the house, an appraiser can't use that as a comp when trying to help another person get a home equity loan or a first mortgage. There are very few comps, and I know I'm trying to get into the weeds here, but in certain neighborhoods that those market information issues need to be addressed just as much as we need resources and money and boots on the ground. You can't just do a whole bunch of activities in a vacuum. You need to be able to pull these threads together into a cohesive initiative where you have the money, where you have the boots on the ground, and the activities you're doing are facilitating what a normal market would want to see. There's a lot to go in there, and hopefully I gave you a little bit of where I would approach it from. But I do think there's opportunities to learn, just as you said, and to make our programs better.
So to the director and to my other colleagues, and I won't belabor the point, but again, I'm really hoping that the department is really going to do a self-analysis as to what is working here, what is not working, what development corporations are working and what development corporations are not working. I think it's time for some tough decisions in this city. And you mentioned about lending practices. There's no doubt the neighbors on East Side are being redlined. They're being discriminated against. And it's up to the administration through the CRA, Community Reinvestment Act, to hold the lending institutions accountable. They have not been held accountable. They are not making loans on the East Side, or they're making it so doggone difficult. You don't want to secure a loan. So we need to have some folks that are championing the issues that we are faced on the East Side. So again, as we go through this whole process this week, those are going to be the kind of questions I'm going to continue to be asking about oversight, responsibility, accountability. We've got to start making the dollars that we do have available, make them work more effectively. I'm just concerned by what I'm seeing. I'm seeing people talking with their feet on the East Side and the East Side neighborhoods. They're fed up with the poverty, despair, the abandoned houses, factories. They're looking for the same thing that other folks are looking for. They're talking with their feet. They're moving, and I can't afford to lose any more wage earners from our northeast side of the city of Cleveland because they feel that there's no hope. I want to give them hope. I want them to feel that this city is committed to improving their neighborhoods. And at this point, I have some real concerns as we're going into 2021 as it pertains to neighborhood stability and a real action plan to stem the tide that we're dealing with out here. And this was before COVID-19. I was seeing all this stuff. COVID-19 only magnified the problems that we have, but this stuff was all in place before this epidemic hit. So again, Mr. Chairman, I want to thank you for this opportunity. I want to thank you for the work that you've done on this committee and all my colleagues. But we have a lot of questions to ask. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilman. And as we go through the next couple of days, hopefully we're going to get some of those answers. But if you look at that historic perspective, as you mentioned, if you think back of the issues that we've been challenged with as time goes on through each decade, and starting with the banking crisis of the 80s and the meltdown there, you can add in the AIDS crisis that we stepped up on, homelessness that we stepped up on, the whole foreclosure crisis, now the pandemic. These are all things that force us to act differently as we go through in the use of these funds. Next up, I have Councilman Bashir Jones.
Thank you so much, Chair. Truly appreciate it. It almost seems like Councilman Polenzek, I've literally heard him say this same speech every single year. And it concerns me that, and this is just, I've been here for 4 years. So he has been serving his community for a very long time. And I just hope that he hasn't been saying the same thing for 40 years. So what I'm getting ready to say is not a knock on the great people who work for this department, because I believe that they have a heart for the people. I really do. And having personal conversations with each of them, I have no doubt about it. So for everyone that's tuning in, this is not a matter of individuals' hearts, but there is a state that we're in. So, Chair, I just want to ask some questions, and hopefully, you don't have to, Mr. Wacker, you don't have to. If it's not meant, you don't have to, expand on it. But if you can just answer it, as quickly as you can. One of the issues that I'm finding is that we live in a city where, in regards to housing, people are too poor to fix their homes, but too rich to get the funding that they need. I'm gonna say it again. They're too poor to fix their homes, but they are too rich to get any support from the government. And what I'm hoping as a city that we don't miss out on an amazing opportunity, because even in spite of where we are right now, we have an amazing opportunity where in a couple of weeks, we will have our very own, will be the Secretary of Housing and Urban Development. At this very moment, organizations like ESOP and organizations like, the different housing organizations, legal aid, so forth and so on, and I've been working with different groups, we need to be crafting as a city a new housing plan that we can present to the Secretary of Housing and Urban Development. That's what we need to be working on right now, because not only in regards of getting funding, but we have to change some of the serious issues around how our residents are not able to get support from the government because they make too much money. It's a problem, man. It's a big problem. And you know what? I used to think it was an East Side problem until I started traveling on the West Side and started to see that housing is an issue on the West Side as well. I just want to make it clear, poverty is not just on the East Side. There's a lot of West Side areas that are dealing with serious poverty issues. And so I just want to make that point that I don't know if this is legislatively, I don't know if this is, I'm ignorant about it. So Mr. Wacker, if you can tell me, how do we change this part of our funding, choosing who to fund? How do we change this?
If you could talk about some of the guidelines and the requirements that you have to adhere to, which says you can only use these resources for these income streams.
Yeah, through the chair. Thank you, Councilman. I agree with everything you said. I think these are real challenges. Housing is a critical component in terms of what we need to address. And I agree with you with the idea of a 10-year housing plan. And we are currently working to develop a 10-year housing plan that you'll see more of throughout the spring. But in terms of what the chairman had asked about, so we are, when you use federal funds, we're really talking about housing that can benefit households that earn 80% less of AMI. So in the city of Cleveland, in the back of your book, there's a chart that says what those income limits are. And for a household of 4, you're basically talking here, I think.
No, I'm sorry. That's exactly what I didn't want you to do. I don't want you to go through it in that way, because we're clear on what the problem is. My question to you is, how do we start the process of changing that? Because, one of the things that we do in the city is that we give major tax abatements to bring in new people. but we're not investing in the people who have invested in our neighborhoods and who have kept it up for generations. So we give tax advantages to bring new people, but we don't give any help to people who've been living in their homes for generations because they're making too much money. So my question is what can we do with Madam Secretary from Cleveland, Ohio? What can we send to her to change these guidelines so that we can begin to help the people who have kept these neighborhoods up for generations?
Yeah, that's a campaign issue for us to lobby to ask the federal government to change the guidelines. And that's just, I don't want to simplify it, but that's the structure that we have to manage within. And so we need to lobby for her to change the guidelines that give us the flexibility to use these resources than the way that they're presented to us now.
Well, I guess that's a simple question. I guess that's a simple answer.
Yeah.
If it was that simple, I'm just wondering why we ain't been to it, but it's fine. That definitely needs to be a part of the plan. The second thing, Chair, is when I saw that map, it seemed that there was a lot of, from the $100 and something million, it seemed that there was a lot of impact happening outside of Cleveland. I'm seeing it in Newburgh. I'm seeing it, those different dots that were all over the place. How is it that the funding is impacting outside of Cleveland? What is that? What is that about?
The federal entitlement funds that the city of Cleveland receives is only for within the city of Cleveland. So yeah, that's a map that shows all the locations within the city of Cleveland that we invest funding in.
And I think it's only eligible in Cleveland. And I think if you would zoom in on the map, what happens is because Newburgh Heights is surrounded by Cleveland, it kind of gives that appearance that it may be part of that funding. But when you zoom in and get to see the closer detail, it would show that we only use our resources for Cleveland only.
Okay, I have to look back. It seemed like it went all the way out to Cleveland Heights. So let me ask this question: for the 60 partners that you guys use to accomplish CDBG goals, what percentage of those partners are minority firms?
We can certainly evaluate that. Off the top of my head, I do not know, but I will say is we make it very, very clear that to our partners, especially CDCs, that we want to see that their board makeup represents the community. There are benefits to that, in that you have greater flexibility if you are an organization that your board representation can be certified as being a community-based development organization. That gives us some flexibility in how we spend our money. If that agency does not have that designation, then we can't take advantage of those flexibilities. And that's sort of been a message we've been working with our partners to make sure they understand that while you're doing good work in neighborhoods you want to serve, those neighborhood, your agency should have a reflection should reflect that neighborhood as well.
Okay, thank you. Now, $1 billion seems like a whole lot of money, but since 1975, you're talking about almost 50 years. So you're talking about maybe $40 million a year on average, which is not a whole lot of money. And especially if the money is not able to go exactly where it needs, where many people are missing out because they don't fit the guidelines. How often are you meeting with now I mean, I'll be honest, in Ward 7, I have some of the best CDCs with Vanico's, Midtown, and now an upcoming St. Clair Superior. How often are you sitting with CDC directors and because I would believe that they could give you a better understanding of how resources can best benefit and what they need. How often are you meeting with them?
Yeah, so we meet with them quarterly. So we have a quarterly meeting with CDC executive directors and their staff. We certainly are in constant contact. I would say our CD planners probably meet with them on a monthly basis, at least over the phone. And then when it permits, we try to go out into the field and monitor them once a year. In terms of them making recommendations, we certainly are open to that. They certainly take a look at how they can spend their money. They propose their budgets. They dictate what their accomplishments are going to be. We review it for compliance and whether it's reasonable. But for the most part, they're driving the agenda within their own CDC service.
Without a doubt. And I close with this, Chair. I want to make this point. Number one, for everybody coming to this as we start budget hearings, if you don't know how many minority businesses you're working with or who the minority, if you don't know that, it's going to be a long meeting. Okay, it's going to be a very long meeting, because I'm gonna let that one pass. But next time I'm going to ask you to pull it out, because I want to know. I want to know, who are you working with? How many of our Hispanic brothers and sisters are you working with? How many Asian representation? How much women? We've been talking about this. We want to know these type of things, because guess what? Our residents want to know these type of things. And for so long, and this is not a knock on anyone here, but for too long, we can't just be doing business and we don't even know who we're doing business with, or not even able to bring it up when asked. Okay, we can't continue to go in that direction. And another thing, when it comes to the CDCs, they are extremely important. And many of the CDCs are very nervous about the fact that funding may be decreasing to them, where they're now having to find other ways to bring money into their organizations, right? So there's a nervousness that exists there, but no one can tell you better how resources can be spent than the CDCs themselves, because they are on the ground every day. What I'm interested in knowing, and I want to ask this question, and Joe, if you can, Tyson, if you can put this, because I want this question asked, is what are the CDC suggesting? What's their suggestions for the community, for community development? And from their suggestions, what suggestions have been implemented? What suggestions have been implemented? I trust Famicos. I trust Director John Alifo. I trust Director Jeff Epstein. I trust them, right? They know how to reach the people. They know what the people are needing. And let me say this in closing, Chair, and you know this better than me, Chair, is that our grandparents, they can't even fix their freaking roofs. I have some residents whose roof has been leaking for 10 years. And we had to find resources outside of the very place called community development that there's, and this is not a knock on you, okay? I know this is on another level. I know this is federal. I know this is not you. But we have to move with a sense of urgency. People are living in these conditions right now, in this moment. And it can't just be what the guidelines say. Well, damn it, we got to find another way. We're getting casino dollars. What are we doing with these casino dollars? Every council person gets a certain amount of money as far as casino dollars, but it's really insufficient, $25,000 if the casino is doing good. I hate to be telling my people, I need you to go to casino more, so that just so that we can get some more money. That's unfortunate, right? So how much of this money is going to the city, and how much of that is being used for what's most important? I'm excuse my passion on this, but this is a major issue. This is a major issue. Housing instability, porches that don't. Since I've been in office, that's been the most important thing. The biggest cause: grandmothers who can't fix their roofs and their porches and their windows and their furnaces. They don't have the money to do it, but they can't get the funding from the city because they're making too much money.
Yeah. So thank you. I appreciate your passion.
Thank you so much. I appreciate your patience. Thank you, Chair, for your patience in this matter. And I know that we're going to talk more about it, but just for those who are coming, please be able to discuss how many minority businesses and stuff are working with you. And also from what the CDCs or what, because I don't want to hear Councilman Polinick say the same thing he's been saying over and over again without there not being an answer. Chair, thank you for your patience.
Thank you. And I just want to have a clarifying point, that the Community Development Department knows exactly where all their funding goes and exactly who their partners are and exactly which CDCs and who they're engaging with. So that's all part of the book and all part of the documentation.
Yeah, I've read the book. I mean, I've read it back to front. And if my chair says it, I'll take it. But it does something to me if my chair say it and I don't hear them say it. That's a problem. Okay?
All right. Thank you. Councilman Griffin?
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. And I also want to break the monotony of 40 years of Mike Polisic saying the same thing about CDBG. So we got to do something different. If not for anything, we call it the Mike Polisic legacy. But let me say this to everybody. I do think that we need to really look at, and I got questions about philosophy. What is our philosophy? And I want to phrase it in a different way than what Councilman Jones said it, because I think he was very on point, where we always look at how we're doing community development, and it's to capitalize or be a catalyst for new development. And then we got, of course, what we know, a lot of the city that's in very tough shape regarding infrastructure programs, and also the housing stock and housing instability, which is the saddest things you would ever see. And I would encourage all directors, that we used to do these tours with the mayor back in a former position I used to have. And sometimes the directors, when they actually go out there, would be a wake-up call, because they would actually be on the ground and they would see some of the issues that we're talking about. Because the saddest thing that you could run into is an elderly person whose children have moved to North Carolina, Atlanta, or one of these other metropolitan areas, and have pretty much left them here. And they're 80, 90 years old, living on fixed income, and don't have the ability to repair homes. Other than crime, I would tell you that is probably the biggest heart-wrenching thing that we see in this city, and quite frankly. So I'm really questioning philosophy. Are we using an equitable philosophy? Do we have the ability to adjust? And I don't want to, I'm not pleased, but all my colleagues don't get offended by what I'm about to say. But I know that we changed the way that we do roads to not just divide the pie up, 17 different ways. How are we focusing on the highest and, best need, and making sure that it's equitable? And like Councilman Jones said, not just focus on trying to bring new people in, but how do we target areas, and how are we using a philosophy to deal with some of these areas that are on that cusp of decline, but not quite there yet? And I'm not just talking about Ward 6. When we have these conversations, I would encourage all my colleagues to be a champion for all these areas, because there's parts of this whole thing about the east side and west side and the differentiation is not necessarily true. And one of the things I'm going to encourage, and I'm going to do as council leadership, is really put us in the bus this year, God willing, if COVID ever can let up and vaccinations happen. Because I really think that all of us need to jump in a bus and go and explore each other's neighborhoods. Because there's some areas on the west side that are taking it on the chin too. So when I ask this question, it's not that I'm trying to redistribute funds to certain areas and others. I'm just asking about philosophy. How do you focus on areas of high need, and how do you do that balance? Because CD is very, very complicated. And I know that the guidelines are very onerous and very tough, but what is the city's philosophy, and how do we focus on are we going to where the highest need? Are we going to areas that are in the balance that we need to stabilize? What typologies are we trying to address? So I'm really just trying to understand the philosophy of CD and how we're really doing community development. I know that was a long loaded question, but I think you got it.
Director, you're on.
Yep, thank you to the chair. I think that's, again, these are all big, important questions. And I agree with you. And then equity is a major component to that. Which is one of the reasons why a one-size-fits-all approach doesn't fit, and why we do so many different programs. The challenge there is, we only have a finite resource of funding, so we do so many different programs. That just means we do a little bit each year, and we try to make the impact that we can. To your broader question about, I guess, the philosophy and what's the proper role of CDBG or home funds, or what it might be. And it is not a source that can solve the problems. It's a source that you can use to leverage other resources to bring to bear on the larger problem. So while people might be frustrated with how CDBG can be restrictive, it could at least be maybe the first money into an initiative that can help bring other money along with it. I think the city also does that a lot with various other initiatives. Good point. An example is sort of Lead Safe Housing Coalition and the Lead Safe Fund. The city put in money, general fund money, not CDBG money. And that brought in private financing and private banks to the table to create a larger pool that could to address lead safe issues in people's housing. Same thing with Mayor's Neighborhood Transformation Initiative. The city put up money in order to get banks to come to the table as a loan loss reserve in order to encourage lending in certain target areas. That is sort of what the role of public, so long as we're able to bring other partners along with us, then that might be the role I would see CDBG playing in. We don't want to keep it a program designed only within CDBG. We want to make sure that program has enough scale to have an impact. Otherwise, if you only deal with CDBG, it's not going to go far enough.
And that's a good point. And you bring up, actually, you led me right into my second question. And as council people, you often steal from your colleagues. And I'm going to steal this one from Kerry McCormick, the colleague from Ward 3. Why do we stay focused on using CD for these purposes? Can't we use them for infrastructure and streets and other things? Because to your point, can't we actually free up general fund dollars that are more flexible to help with development and some of these other things as opposed to CD dollars? And I apologize if Kerry was going to ask that question.
Hello.
But
say louder. Say it louder.
But I just want to understand why we do that and if that is something that we've thought about and what we could do.
Yeah, through the chair. My short response is you always have to be careful in terms of substituting CDBG dollars for what should be or is considered to be general government expenses. You can do special initiatives, sometimes around like addressing safety or infrastructure, but it can't be to replace what would be the normal government function. Can't just take a perfect example is say, if the city or the school district is required to provide education to all children, and they're supposed to come up with resources to do that. The federal government doesn't want to see the school district take CDBG money and pay for the local school system because education is a local government function. So long as we're not paying for local government activity, then we can use CDBG funding.
Okay. All right. And the reason I asked that because you mentioned some of these things, safety and some of these other things that we're trying to do around, infrastructure. We know we have aging infrastructure. The only thing that I would just tell everybody is, I take developers, and last week I took a developer, drove him around the ward just to see what, where we have opportunities for investment. And one of the things that you realize when you're out there is that some of these neighborhoods have some real challenges. How do you try, and I want to say this with a heavy emphasis on try, how do you try to go to neighborhoods that are really, really in tough shape, and really the CD dollars and those things won't leverage any other dollars, and it just doesn't do it. And I cringe to say that because, the mayor has had a philosophy not to deal with the shrinking cities model. And, those of you who don't know the shrinking cities, that there's some places like Detroit in the past that have just ignored certain parts of the city, just wrote them off because it wasn't worth it to go over there and provide city services. How do you avoid not trying to spread yourself too thin and like peanut butter and really try to go to the areas? Hence why there was a lot of thought that went into, and I want to just tell you guys, I think that a lot of thought and research went into why we wanted to develop that East 105th and East 93rd corridor, because those areas have experienced years of disinvestment and abandonment. And it was in West 25th as well. and invested in those areas, we felt would yield a higher rate return on our investment, because now Cleveland Clinic is for the first time, investing outside of their walls to complement the work that we're doing, because we've removed blight and other things. And now we're working with them in order to try to focus on developing some of those areas around there, as well as the rest of the corridor of East 93rd all the way to the Garfield Heights and Bracknell border. So how do you try to focus? And I know I gave you a rhetorical question and part of your answer, but how do you focus on those areas and not try to spread yourself too thin? And I yield, Mr. Chair, after that.
Thank you.
Give you a short answer. I think there's two parts to it, through the chair. So one is there should be a philosophy of going big as much as possible. And I mean, going big is not, you're not just solely relying on CDBG. That might be a part of the pie, but you're developing a larger pie with other resources. And two, it's really making sure you have enough boots on the ground to get the job done. It's one thing to have money and no one to implement it. So when we are looking, do we have a partner that we can do, that can execute? Do we have city staff that can execute? Do we have to hire? Do we have to make those type of decisions? So I think those are two parts of the pie, that or two parts of the picture that you need to address.
Thank you, Director. Oh, go ahead.
One last
Sure.
thing. I apologize. The other last thing that I try to do, which I really hope that we work with the CDCs to do, is that I do not invest casino block grant dollars, nor do I complement organizations, CD or anybody else, community development corporations, with the pot of money that we have for community development, unless I see how they're using it to multiply or to have other resources that complement it. So I don't know if that's a criteria that you guys use. I didn't see that in your scoring mechanism, but I really hope that at some point in time, CD is really looking very close at only dealing with agencies and putting money in the agencies that are doing exactly what you just said, which is not trying to rely on CD dollars alone, casino dollars alone to do projects, but what other funding are they bringing to the table and how are they leveraging that funding? So thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Wackers. I look forward to working with you.
Yeah, thank you, Councilman, and certainly acknowledgement of the work you're doing along 105 and the broader planning where you look at leveraging significant change to make a huge difference. And when we talk about philosophies and impact, you look at much broader than a single project, but more look at how it impacts a region and bringing infrastructure dollars, all those kind of things. That's what philosophy brings to change an area significantly. So thanks for your engagement with that. I have Councilwoman Spencer on.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wanted just to start by acknowledging the tremendous amount of work that community development staff have done this past year, since the beginning of the pandemic. I'm really amazed by the volume of additional funds that you all have managed and deployed in the community. So I just want to acknowledge how much work you've done. And it's really been an extraordinary effort during the pandemic to get some of these key programs deployed in the neighborhood. So I wanted to thank you all so much. And it sounds like that heavy lift will continue as we hopefully anticipate things like additional rental assistance funding that's still so badly needed. So thank you for everything you've done and will continue to do to get us through this pandemic. Really, my colleagues through the chair to the director have asked so many great questions already. I just wanted to echo a little bit of that. I think Councilman Griffin and McCormick were touching upon this question of is there another way to deploy are there other ways to deploy our CDBG dollars? And I just wanted to ask through the chair to the director, high level, how are peer cities using, you made this, I made a note of it, CDBG can't replace a normal government function. How are peer cities doing it differently? Are there any takeaways for us?
Yeah, I think Cleveland is one of the 10 largest entitlement communities in terms of the amount of funding we receive from the federal government across CDBG, Home, ESG, and HOPWA. So there's very few peer cities that we can compare ourselves and see what they do. A lot of cities just get small amounts for CDBG or home money. That really, they probably RFP most of that money out to subrecipients, so nonprofits that can deliver services. Most cities do not have a CDC network that we have. Part of that, I think, was a conscious effort in the past by the city to invest in that type of network. And I think even if you look at the larger cities, say New York, Cleveland, Los Angeles, that have CDB entitlement money, they really fund the bulk of that through large scale departments like our own. They probably partner a lot with social services, with nonprofits, but other programming they're doing in-house, like what we're doing with SHAP and RAW, Land Bank, our Housing Development Office. So we're sort of unique in what we have in terms of the CDC environment, but we're not unique in that we're running programs out of our department, and we're not unique in that we depend heavily on partners through nonprofits to deliver a lot of our services.
Thank you for that clarification. Through the chair to the director, I wanted just to clarify sort of a high level understanding that I have had working myself as a practitioner at a community development corporation, which is that year over year, I don't know for how long this has been going on, but requirements have been getting more strict. In other words, the city needs to demonstrate accomplishments for HUD, to demonstrate to HUD how these dollars are being used. And yet the definition is becoming narrower and narrower, and the requirements are becoming stricter. Is that statement generally true? Is that a progression? And do you anticipate, if so, do you anticipate even stricter requirements going forward?
So I think, Mr. Chair, whether or not the statement is true is less, it's more of I guess a responsibility on the city. We were put on notice back in 2015 through a monitoring about the level of activity that could be reported from CDCs to HUD. At the time, it was raised as a concern, which basically means, here's your warning. If we see this persist, then it'll be termed a finding, at which point we need to sort of make, institute specific changes. In terms of what CDCs are doing, and I think what we've been trying to do over time is not make it stricter, but to bring them up to the standard that they should be reporting at. That has been, I think, a learning curve. Not so much it's becoming stricter. I think CDCs have actually responded well, maybe begrudgingly, but we do see the improvement in the numbers. So I don't want to say that they are not performing, because that's never been the case. The case has been, do they provide the data points that HUD wants? And that's really an arbitrary decision in terms of what HUD wants to see. And I think the numbers, if you look at the CDC quarterly reports, I think that were in the share file, you can look through that. Those were probably represented the first quarter numbers. The second quarter numbers are pretty good for CDCs this year. And we've seen a marked, a growing competency, but we're not completely there yet. There are still a lot of CDCs that need additional technical assistance, training, support, capacity to get where we need to be. And I think once we get to the CDC part of this public hearing, we can sort of go deeper into what we're seeing and where we can go. But I think generally, I don't view it as sort of entirely a negative. I've been very happy. I see the hard work they've been doing and understand that they worked hard to give us the accomplishments we need. So I'll leave it there.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, it may be of interest. I know that these days are very, very full already, but not necessarily for this year, but generally speaking, it may be of interest to bring some of these practitioners in to provide testimony about what it's like to try to deploy these dollars in the field. I don't know if that's a perspective we've heard before as a council body, but that may be of interest.
Yeah, that was in back as Mike Polensik, Councilman Polensik would say, back in the day. Back in the day, we used to bring the CDCs to the table and have a little conga line of folks coming up and talking about their programming and what they're accomplishing. But the data points now and the ability to produce lots of information on what accomplishments are, really now it's just a matter of numbers and what people are doing. But we certainly can have a session, whether you call it a therapy session or whether we call it really a working hearing, that we talk about what the CDCs are doing. That's something we can put on with Joe Tytron as something that we can circle back on.
Sure, and I don't picture it as like a anecdotal parade of talking about what work activity per se, more related to the actual CDBG dollars and what it takes to deploy them and translate them into an accomplishment. I think it's a little more complex than folks realize. And then I guess just one more question through the chair to the director, which would be, we've talked about, a lot of points were brought up by my colleagues. There was even the point of, from Councilman Bashir Jones about these dollars need more flexibility, right? That there are income limits, and yet we're not reaching a lot of our residents. And this question of lobbying came up, and should we be thinking about, who should we be approaching about how to better meet the needs of our citizens? So, it's an interesting thing. So, Director, you are, I know, so well steeped in all of these programs and you understand them so well. Given everything, what would you recommend would be the best path forward in terms of use of CDBG? I know we receive 4 pots of funds, but CDBG is the largest. What would you say is the best use of CDBG for the city of Cleveland going forward? If that's not too crazy a question.
Yeah, that's a high level call. So.
It is.
Yeah, to the chair. There is at the end of the day, I think it needs to have an impact. HUD wants to see these dollars have an outcome, an impact, rather than an output, generating a widget. And that is a value consideration that I don't think I am entirely qualified. I'm more the administrator. I don't want to make value judgments for the city of Cleveland. That's, I think, the role of the mayor and the council, in conjunction with public feedback and input, just like you said, who our partners are. So right now we have a design and we have a 5-year plan that we are trying to put together. That's sort of through input, I think, is where we'll come to that. I can certainly facilitate that and then implement it. But me to be the expert and tell you, here's how you do it, if you don't listen to me, is not my job. So.
I yield, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
And who do you think the Browns should draft in the first round? If we're gonna. Thank you, Councilman McCormick.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I'd like to just add a little bit to what my colleagues said, and I will be very brief because they've said it much better than I will be able to. But Chair, I've brought this up from the past several years in budget hearings. So this is not new. However, it just seems like a kind of, a subject that keeps coming up. And but again, I think that council really should take a hard look at reallocating CDBG dollars, at least a portion of them, to other uses, and then replacing those dollars with more flexible funding. As Councilman Spencer noted, the process for a CDC to justify the CDBG allocation is very strenuous, and I would say it wastes a whole lot of time on their staff efforts. And from everything I've heard, we can use CDBG for streets and for other types of expenditures for the city. We just rolled over $5 million in general fund dollars into the streets program for next year. So the point is that holistically, from a budgeting perspective, I think there are ways that we can look at how we plug in CDBG for other uses that the city has concerns around, what is bring or what HUD or local, whatever the regulations are for folks that might FAP. Obviously there are other funding pots out of a $1.7 billion budget that may be more flexible to help a senior who's just above a threshold. So again, look at how other cities spend dollars in a much different way. And I think that as a city, we need to of how we can deploy CDBG dollars for for the important categories that we do use CDBG dollars. How do we backfill that, whether that be general fund or other dollars, for seniors or whatever it might be, or CDCs. So again, I just want to reiterate that from everything I've heard, from looking at what other cities have done, we can do this. And I think that as we see the relationship between HUD and the city becoming one where they're more focused on the metrics and specific outcome measures, Councilman or Mr. Chairman, you're very well aware of the whole code enforcement issue that we ran into a couple of years around CDBG dollars. And from everything we're seeing, it appears they're going to be becoming more and more strict on those requirements. As a council, we have the ability to adjust our budget and where funding sources come and go to. So I think that as a council, we really should be taking a hard look at CDBG allocation, where we plug those dollars into, and how we service the important topics that those CDBG dollars currently go to with other revenue streams. So it's something that we probably, also should bring Director Dumas into the conversation to discuss. But I do think it's time for us to have a critical conversation about our CDBG dollars.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilman Hairston?
Okay, there we go. Had a little technical difficulty. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I'll be even more brief. My colleagues really have dived into some questions that, as we've heard today, that we've been asking or commenting about for the last, 4 years now. And I really hope that as we go through this budget process in 2021, that we really look to find ways to deal with some of these things that we are discussing. Not merely the fact, well, we can't do this because of this. Well, we can't do that because of that. But we really, as we heard from Councilwoman Spencer and Councilman McCormick, to look at what other cities are doing, how they are repealing and replacing some line items and substituting for other sources of revenue that maybe the city is bringing in. Again, we get casino dollars. We know that the casino revenue is down. And I also don't want to send our residents out there to spend more. But I think a little here and a little from there, this pot, that pot, can make up the difference in what we are hearing from some of us who have been on this meeting today and what we've heard over the last 4 years. So, along my colleagues, we're challenging this department in this process to really think outside of the way we've been operating for quite some time. I would like to bring up a point on Councilman McCormick when he spoke about the fact that the regulations are becoming more and more tight each year, that even with the storefront program, now there is a requirement of a phase 1 study to use HUD dollars for storefront renovations. If you are in a certain radius of car shops, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Director Wackers, and there's some other guidelines that have been put in place as well, even regarding storefront renovation. And that process in itself could be a long process, but Terry Sandy does a great job in her department in working projects through that process. But that is something, in itself that is now becoming a part of that checklist of phase 1s. And like I know that there's many folks who go to this program who just have enough for the renovations, right? who cannot afford the phase one. And depending on what the phase one says, they may need a phase two, right? So, knowing that, I think it's important that we really, and I'll say it again, look at ways to swap out some of these dollars for other dollars, so that way we won't be handcuffed to some of these issues or regulations or rules, whatever you want to call them, that's coming out from HUD. And I get that the city has to operate within those confines, but we have to be creative at the same time as well, to be able to still address the need that not only our residents have, but our businesses have as well.
So and I think your point's well taken, but there is we can look at that as we move forward, and we hear that as a task for our committee to look at where that can be done. And I think, as Director Wacker's talked about, there really isn't a pure city to Cleveland when it comes to how we use our CDBG and our CDC structure. But the same issues that we face with our CDC's use of dollars are some of the same issues we face with the department using them. So, for instance, environmental review for taking our CDBG dollars and put them into road construction has created quite a headache for them as well. So I think those are the things that we balance as we move forward. So I appreciate that comment, Councilman.
And I agree wholeheartedly, right? That there's some challenges. Even the line item that we have for casino, looking at what we use those casino dollars on that this department receives, and maybe some of those uses is allowable through another process. Code enforcement, as we've heard, was a target by HUD that was no longer an eligible use, right? We've heard the phase ones now from storefront and so forth. So just to end on that is that I understand. I know the department here is loud and clear. I know you, Mr. Chairman, understands. If no one else does, the process and how this works. But as we heard from Councilman Jones, that we have an incoming HUD secretary who is well aware, who has been involved and engaged on municipal level up to the federal level, who we really at this point started that campaign with the new secretary to help change some of the ways that maybe HUD have been restricting us, or not only us, but other cities around the U.S. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you. Councilman Plunsick, did you have a closing comment before we move on to the next session?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I just want to say to my honorable colleagues, to you and to the administration, there was greater flexibility in the day. We council members were able to use block grant funds for resurfacing, but they had to be used in low and mod areas. We used approximately $2 million every year for the mini station program that we directed because of the concerns with violence and crime in our neighborhoods. Then, unfortunately, there were some council members who took their ward allocations and used them just to pour sidewalks, which was a major mistake. major mistake. And they were receiving, some of those council members received $1 million a year, and they just poured sidewalks. So now you have a bunch of new sidewalks in front of empty lots. So there was greater flexibility. I do hope as well that we do take a look at some of the recommendations that have been made here, look at other major cities, and so we don't have to recreate the wheel. I think we all have come to the conclusion that we have to figure out to do something different in our approach as we go forward. I also want to indicate that I have communicated with former still Congresswoman, I guess, Marshall Fudge, and suggested to her, and we've had an exchange of dialogue going back, that to utilize Cleveland as a test kitchen. Let's try some different approaches in Cleveland. Let's try some unique avenues to pursue, and she's open to that. So let's hope that that does materialize with some of the suggestions that come out of this committee and out of the administration. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Councilman Jones, you wanted to make one more point?
Well, I have some questions. I wanted to get information earlier because I didn't have the information. So I got it, I looked through it. And so I just have a line of questioning that I have based upon the chairman's opening statement.
Okay, real quick.
Yes. Well, Mr. Chairman, can I have some consideration of time?
Is it related to the statement? It's related specific to the statement?
It's just like all the other colleagues, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
I want to have the same opportunity.
Yeah, you did speak already. Go ahead.
No, I asked for a point of information, Mr. Chairman, and it's a difference in speaking and asking for.
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead, please.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, for being so patient and so nice. All right, so now the question, Mr. Chairman, that I have to Mr. Wacker. First, I want to say thank you for being our director, and you seem to be so knowledgeable about a lot of these things. And in your presentation, you talked about quite a bit. So, Mr. Chairman, a number of my colleagues asked a lot of important and great questions, and I won't repeat a lot of those, but I do want to point out some things that Mr. Wacker talked about, which is significant and important, that I believe that the city of Cleveland can look at trying to put something in place to deal with some of the most profound impacts that we have not been able to seem to get our hands around, is the spread of poverty throughout the east side of the city of Cleveland. When we look at the investments, and Mr. Wacker talked about that the small investments that community development has and how it moves that investment in our neighborhoods, that there is a need for more investments on the outside. And he talked about having a big impact. And so marketplaces and market forces. And Mr. Chairman, that leads us to community reinvestment. When we talk about housing development in the city of Cleveland, we need to get our financial institutions in the city of Cleveland involved in reinvesting in our communities. And Mr. President, you heard me make a presentation at one of your committees where I talked about that as a sitting elected official in the east side of the city of Cleveland, that I cannot even make investments into my property due to the fact that it is considered an over improvement in my home. That just should not be, given the fact that I'm credit worthy and I have the ability and capacity to pay back. It is modern day redlining. And I know that some of our colleagues, most of which I know agree with this, and some may have an indifference there. But at the end of the day, when we look at the reports that you have given, and I looked at some of those reports, our financial institutions are not investing back into our city. And so then the question, Mr. Chairman, that I would have for Mr. Wackers, what kind of vehicles can community development put in place to get our financial institutions who are making a lot of money in our city and our region, of which our city has billions of dollars deposited in their bank accounts. How do we get them back involved in helping with and helping you with your job as relates to community development?
Yeah, through the chair. Thank you, Councilman. I do agree with you on the analysis of the problem. Lending, financial industry practices are a big part of what needs to be addressed here in the city of Cleveland. CRA is obviously a tool, but I think it's a tool that's has its own challenges. I know, we receive $30 million in federal entitlement funding each year, but that is dwarfed by the amount of bank lending in any community, and more specifically, the hole that exists in Cleveland in terms of lack of bank lending. So engagement with banks is an important sort of initiative that we've been undertaking the last few years. Aisha Weeks, our bank relations manager, will be presenting, and we can talk about this more in depth. But I think it is definitely a priority area, because without a real engagement strategy and a way to get banks to the table for a whole host of initiatives, our federal funding and resources really are just will not be able to clear the way for other activity.
And Mr. Chairman, to answer that answered my colleague's Mike Polensic's question about, he's been in the city for quite some time and he's watched his neighborhood completely deteriorate. The next question is, Mr. Chairman, my neighborhood is considered a middle neighborhood. So we're poised right now where we could either continue to decline as we have been declining, or we can begin to move in a different direction what kind of plans of investment coming from community development will assist in helping, or what tools are available in helping me to maintain as well as build off of all the good work that you've done here in this department, Mr. Chairman, to Mr. Wackers?
Councilman, we have a whole section dedicated to middle neighborhoods this afternoon that we can hit on that topic.
Okay, great. And Mr. Chairman, to Mr. Wacker, I'll come back with that when we talk about middle neighborhoods. But the issue of community reinvestment, and Mr. Chairman, you know, I know that we've talked to the president of Cleveland City Council about this subject, that we do have a community reinvestment department. And with your permission, Mr. Chairman, I would not mind having the opportunity, if with the deference of my colleagues, to formulate a committee where we can look into our community reinvestment and see how we could do something a little bit different than what we've been doing in the past to establish and build bridges of hope and opportunity to redevelop our communities that are really hurting right now on both the east side, Mr. Chairman, and the west side of the city of Cleveland. I believe that our citizens deserve better. I'm a council person that's willing to get granular and work really hard for the citizens of this city. So I want to put that out there again. I remember my colleagues, Carrie McCormick was willing to sit on that committee, as well as my colleague, Brashear Jones. And for a special note, Mr. Chairman, I noticed that we haven't had any standing committees for 20 years now. So if we do have a committee that is members of council who are really willing to work to see what possibilities there could be to build some kind of hope and opportunity for our citizens versus sitting here for 20, 30, 40 years with the same problems and the same issues, and yet we're none the farther or closer to resolving those issues. So, Mr. Chairman, I don't want to be here 30 years from now with these same issues. I want to be able to work. Will you help me work? Will you help me be able to help and establish some kind of format where we can really put together a standing committee to talk about how we can partnership with the community development and start moving some real projects along in areas like the Lee Harbor, Seville, Miles community, and most part of the southeast section of the city of Cleveland, that which, Mr. Chairman, unfortunately is being redlined. And when I asked, Mr. Chairman, the finance person who was financing the project, I asked them, where could I get and how could I develop in my neighborhoods? We're in the east side of the city of Cleveland. And I was told I could build in downtown. I could build next to Cleveland Clinic. I could build in University Circle where the comps are at. I could also develop in Little Italy, and I could develop on 65 to 80%, depending on where it was at on the west side of town. So, Mr. Chairman, I really would love to work with you to put that together. And then lastly, Mr. Chairman, to Mr. Wacker, we heard something to talk about, and I won't get into it, but just something that I would suggest that we should look into. And if you have anything to add to this, Pittsburgh is doing a great job talking about matching their development department, their community development department, along with the financial institutions. And they're really building up in Pittsburgh. They just have not stopped. They're unabated how they've really started developing all around their neighborhoods, their middle neighborhoods. And I don't know if you are familiar with all of the various different programs, data systems they have in, their ability and their capacity to communicate and reach out to their citizens about the various different local programs. Because it's one thing to offer these programs, Mr. Chairman, but there's another thing if the citizens are aware of them. And I think that they've done a good job in those areas. And I'm not sure if you want to talk a little bit about that, about local development and what they're doing there. If you know, if you're not, I could make available to you, Mr. Chairman, to the director a link so that you can see all of the various different things that Pittsburgh is doing up there. And then lastly, Mr. Chairman, I'm not opposed to some type of swapping program where I believe that all of block grant funds, and just because, and the chairman is right, it is such a rigorous process to access these funds. And because the constant changing of the block grant system year in and year out, it makes it very not flexible at all. And it makes it very difficult for local development corporations to continue to from year in and year out to be so strained. And then, Mr. Chairman, I would like for the director, because this is something, and we'll talk about some of these issues that I have and our storefront programs. I'll leave it for our storefront piece. But lastly, Mr. Chairman, thank you. I really appreciate the director and his department doing the very ominous hard work that they do. And then I would just like if he would explain to us, because I know he touched upon it, these new changes that HUD is talking about in terms of a 5-year plan and strategy. So I would presume that that will be a part of that presentation you made on 6. How will we go through these next set of changes, and will we be able to meet them?
Yeah, briefly to touch on each of those. So certainly we're looking at other cities for middle neighborhoods, best practices. Baltimore is one of the cities we're looking at. You mentioned Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh is one of the cities we're looking at around banking relations activities. They have a really impressive program down there, and we are wanting to move in that direction, but we've been in a process of re-engagement with all 14 local banks in the city of Cleveland, bank institutions, not bank, physical banks. And then finally, in terms of this 5-year annual plan, it's not a new requirement. It's been in place since I want to say 1992. That every 5 years you develop an outlook for what the next 5 years is going to look like in terms of where you're going to direct your federal resources. So, but that is a plan that'll be in development, and we're required to submit it by the 16th this year.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilman Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Director, you're up with the next chapter.
Yes, thank you. I'm going to share my screen again, just so I can follow on. I'm going to go through this quick so that we have time for our housing programs. Let me share. So let me go. Apologize. All right, so with me today, I have the Division of Administrative Services Commissioner, Joy Anderson, and her acting budget manager, Dwight Dawson, as well as the accounting manager, Matt Rosing. They're the ones that sort of help us in developing this budget along with all other members of the department, but they're the ones that pull it together and finalize it. This year's approach to this year's budget. So this is an estimate largely. We do not know what our current entitlement amounts are from the federal government. We do know that Congress has passed a budget, which is great news. We typically don't see that having happened by yet. But there are a couple of things that are in flux. Obviously, I think the change in administration is to play, but also whether or not they're going to be including this year's census, the new census numbers, into how they allocate funding. Some conversation with HUD in Columbus indicates that they're so far behind, they might just use the 2010 numbers in order to do this year's allocation, but that has not been finalized. But we're looking just to maintain existing programming. So what that means is that we're trying to do flat funding across most programs, and that if we have to reduce any allocation, we're going to come back to the council. Because right now this legislation is an RLA legislation. It's all estimates, but we have to come back in order to give you our final numbers. So you guys have an opportunity to see how our actual award, if it goes up or down, with how that will actually be impacted, and have a say in that. Really quickly, so HUD, how did they come up with how much we get? It's not just based on population, it's actually more based on the lag in growth since 1960. makes up about 20% of what our formula is. How many people are in poverty, about a third of what they take into consideration is based on how many people you have in poverty. How many units of pre-1940 housing, which makes up half of the total amount of the formula. And then there's an A and B formula. There's also one that looks at overcrowding, poverty, and population, but we typically fall into the formula B because of how old our housing stock is. And using that formula, they rank all the communities and then determine basically from the pool of funds. This year it's 3.4 billion. No, yeah, all right. I believe it's billion. And then divide amongst all the entitlement communities. There's around 3,000 entitlement communities throughout the country. Because we have high poverty and high number of pre-1940 housing, we end up pretty high on that rank, which, you know, in the top 10. Here's a list of sort of how the census has impacted allocations over the years, but it's depending, there's a number of different factors. It's not just the poverty or housing, it's also how large the pool of money is, and then how many other communities are eligible. Since we have a new, if the new census numbers, they'll take a look at what communities fall off the list and what communities come on the list. And that could have an impact on how much that pie gets split up. But in the past, so back in 2011, we saw sort of a decrease of 27% versus 2001. I did those 10-year spread just to give you a greater sense of what the split will be. The impact will be much, I think, smaller this time around. HUD increased the budgets over the last few years. The comparison of last year's budget, this year's budget is a 5% increase. I think that will help us tremendously. But if you look at the factors in the change, so the population lag, poverty, and pre-1940 housing have remained fairly stable. So I don't foresee significant changes, but we are budgeting, you know, our numbers right now reflect a 7% decrease in an effort to be conservative. Even though we might show a decrease in a particular fund, we're looking to backfill that with balances that we might have, so that in the end, programs will basically be flat funded compared to last year. So this is the allocation. So 3.4 billion is what's been allocated by Congress this year. 1.3 billion in home funds has been allocated. 290 million in ESG homeless funding has been allocated for this year, and 430 million in HOPA funding has been allocated for 2021. Using those numbers, if we're not including the 2020 census, this is what we would expect to receive. So it would be an increase across the board of overall programs. But we have yet to, you know, depending, HUD still has to go with formula, whether or not they include 2020 census or not, really depends on where we're going. So with that, let me pull up the budget and I'll walk you through it. So as we said, we right now we're having a conservative estimate. So CDBG, we're estimating 20.1 million for home investment. We're estimating 4.6 million. Emergency shelter or solutions grant, 1.7 million, and then housing opportunities for persons age, 1.3 million. These amounts are all a decrease in theory. We really don't know what they're going to be until HUD gives us our award. But I think it gives us a way to sort of look, how can we maintain a flat budget? Where do we need to backfill with program balances or decertified funds from the previous year in order to make sure that we don't have an impact across our service delivery. And we'll go into each of these as in each presentation, but in your briefing book, page 1-3 sort of has our budget, line item budget by program. I won't go into each of these numbers, but I just want to point out where you can find it, because we'll go in through each of these at every single presentation. And I just want to, if there's anything I want to touch on. Oh yeah. So there are some restrictions on how we can allocate funding, just so you're aware of. We have a cap on how much funding we can put into public service. We are capped at 15% of our formula or whatever we spent, no more than what we spent in 1983. So we spent 4.7 million in 1983, which is more than 15% of our formula amount in a given year. We can put in program income into that, and that gives us a total of 4.8 million that we can spend for public services. We spend that on our citywide programs, our public social service programs, as well as some programming and CDCs. And then we also have a cap in administrative funding. It's not shown here, but we can spend each year up to 20% of our CDBG allocation for administrative costs. We have, so across our department, 40 positions that are funded through the administrative cap. Most other positions in our department of 81 employees are funded through program delivery. We can charge their salary as a program delivery cost as opposed to a program administration cost. And then when the city also takes out a set amount of indirect costs of 285,000 each year to essentially pay for what the cost of the services we get from finance, from law department, and other sort of functions that the city provides and supports our department. That's a flat fixed fee. We justify to HUD what the index direct cost is, and then based on their formula, and then we can charge that as an indirect cost. All right. I know I want to be able to keep going on to our programs or other chapters. So is there any questions on the budget?
Mr. Chair, if I could, can we ask Mr. Wackers if he could, for some of us that are challenged visually, if he could make the screen a little wider?
When you just increase the zoom on the screen as we put up some of these numbers.
Okay. Are there any numbers I should pull up right now? Because the budget pages are 1-6 through, I think, 1-11.
Yeah, we all have hard copies as well as stuff that was sent out.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr.
Thank
Chair.
you. Councilwoman Spencer?
Yes, sorry, just a brief clarification through the chair to the director. What is the total budgeted for general administrative? I'm sorry, I couldn't hear that number.
Yeah, you can find it on page 2.1. It's for salaries and benefits. It's a little over 3 million, so it's $3,095,467. We also charge operating expenses of $218,500, and then the city takes out an indirect cost of $285,000.
Thank you.
Councilman Jones, you had a point? Unmute yourself, Councilman Joe Jones. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, to the director, as I'm looking at your budget, I'm looking here at page 2.1, and I'm swinging back over at page 2.2 that talks about your organizational chart, which you have in your Division of Neighborhood Services, 28 staff, Division of Administrative Services, 29 staff, and Division of Neighborhood Development, 21 staff. And I'm trying to kind of get in my mind exactly what is the total staff members that you have that help to run community development department.
Yeah, we have a budget of 81 staff members. We do have a few, one foundation funded position, but we use 81 as the budget staff.
Okay, so for this budget we're looking at right now, you have a number of 81 people who are staff that's currently working in the development department now. Is that correct?
Yeah, with that's there are some positions are funded through general fund, but it's a handful. So I think last year it was 9. This year, the mayor's proposed budget is different, so I don't want to pull that number or give you one.
So currently right now, how many, that this is above and beyond your 81 staff, you have currently what's being funded out of the mayor's for your staffing? How many people is that right now currently? Actual.
In the general fund?
That you're saying for your whole overall, to run your department, Mr. Chairman, to the director, you have 81 staff members you have right now. Then you have another grouping coming from the mayor's budget. So how many members are that? How many people?
It's 81 total.
And that includes the administration. Does that also include what you were saying earlier, that you have people who are on maybe funded from another source?
It would not include those people.
So you have 81 people currently right now. And then the other people who are funded that are working on your staff, how many people would that be?
Either 1 or 2. I know there's one that's, Commissioner Jackson would know better if she has a lead safe person working on a foundation grant, but I know we have Middle Neighborhoods program manager who's working on a foundation grant.
So we have about maybe 83 people that work for us right now total in your department?
Correct.
And Mr. Chairman, knowing that the other 2, you can pull them back. Of the 81 staff members, what's your total budget for your 81 people who work in your department? What's that number?
So in our program, so it'll be our administrative budget plus in the budget pages on page 1-3 and 1-4, you'll notice that some of the line items have the word administration after it. So we have housing trust fund administration, homeowner rehab administration, land bank administration, storefront renovation administration. So I would have to pull all those numbers together and I can give you the exact figure. But I would say in order to run all the staffing, in order to run our programs, is probably around $5 million.
Is that, you're saying it's a $5 million to run all of the staff people to be able to do this? About $5 million with benefits and everything?
The in-house staffing, correct.
Okay. And that includes the 81 staff members?
Correct.
Okay. No further questions, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Continue, Director.
Yeah, that's really the summary of the budget. I just wanted to make it clear that this is an estimate and we're going to come back with actual numbers. I want so you can see that, but I think so that we can stay on track with our submission to HUD. That's why we do these public hearings with an estimate. But at the end of the day, the philosophy is to continue the program we have and flat fund our programs at this point in time.
Great, thank you. And as you're calling up your next section, the housing information, just want to remind my colleagues that we have a schedule that we sent out. If we finish early on a particular morning or afternoon, we will then do our break to start the next session as scheduled. If we don't finish a section, we will carry it over to the next session. Director?
Yes, thank you. So let me just share my screen real quick, then I'll hand it over to Commissioner Jackson. But I wanted to share a few quick things. Obviously, we have our housing development team here today, DNS Commissioner Jackson, along with a Healthy Homes Program Manager, Nina Holzer, and then we have Department of Aging Director, Mary McNamara here as well. But I do want to point out that there's other key people to our team. our home repair manager, Novella Lockett. She's actually out because her mother passed away, but otherwise she would have been here. She's very important in delivering SHAP programs. We also have our chief inspector, Johnny Warren, and then assistant chief inspector, Michael Johnstone, who really work in the field with homeowners, making sure that we can get projects scoped, estimated, get contractors to work, and then clear those projects and complete it to the satisfaction of the property owners. But I'll let Commissioner Jackson go into that more detail. But I just want to give you a visual of the work that she does, and her team does a tremendous amount of work. These are intensive projects, each and every one, but in SHAP, so our Senior Housing Assistance Program over 2029, which is the most recent completed year, in the first half of 2020, we have over 233 projects that are scattered throughout the city. And our RAW, which are our larger scale small apartment buildings, from 2029 to 2020, which is the program that she's been working very hard to reinvigorate, and I think is starting to show some success. The pins here sort of show where the distribution of where those projects are. And then finally, the paint program, which I know is of very much interest to you guys, and we'll probably speak more to it in the general fund budget. But her department, just closed out the first year of that program initiative, and she might go into more. But here are the 200 plus accomplishments of houses painted throughout the city, and I hope it gives you a sense of the reach that her division has, and the number of people she tries to reach, actually have a positive impact every year in and year out. I know I've heard it from the council before. This is not enough. I agree with you. But at the end of the day, we try to serve as many people as possible. And I think these maps at least give an impression that we are doing that. So I'll turn this over to the commissioner to give her presentation and go through the budget book. Stops.
Good morning to the chair and to the members of City Council. The Division of Neighborhood Services provides direct services to the citizens of this great city that not only allow our residents to age in place, but we also provide home maintenance services that aid in preserving the work done in the home and address health and safety issues within the home. So this morning, we will walk through the various programs that are provided within the division and programs that are managed with our community partners. Because we work as one team in getting product on the street, we will also do a brief walkthrough of the programs that are not funded by CDBG or home. And first, we will talk about our SHAP program, which is our Senior Housing Assistance Program. And the Department of Aging has been an awesome partner throughout the years in aiding community development and getting this program off the ground and making this program a success. So I am going to ask that Director of Aging, Mary McNamara, come and give her presentation first. Director, you have to come off of mute.
That was going to be a really good speech if you couldn't have heard me with it. So thank you, Commissioner Jackson, and thank you, Chairman Brancatelli, for this opportunity, and Director Wackers. As Commissioner Jackson said, we are proud to collaborate with community development on so many programs, but in this particular budget, once again, it allocates money to the Department of Aging to help with both application assistance for the SHAP program, and it also allows us to operate the chore program and tree program. So I'll just give a few highlights about the Department of Aging's role before turning it over to Commissioner Jackson. But the programs we're talking about provide services to individuals 60 years of age and older, or individuals 18 to 59 with a disability. I'll speak first about the chore program, which is considered one of the home maintenance programs. We have 4 main services in the chore department: grass cutting, which is once a month from May to October; snow shoveling, that's path shoveling, that's based on the weather; leaf raking, one time per season in the fall; and indoor chores, which includes heavy cleaning, smoke, and carbon monoxide installation. I'm proud to tell you that all 3 of the 4 programs, minus indoor chores, operated completely and fully this year without an impact from COVID. We discontinued our indoor chore program for the safety of both the staff and the seniors, but grass cutting, snowpath shoveling, and leaf raking continued. The second program is a very popular one, the Cleveland Tree Assistance Program. And this is a partnership between community development and urban forestry to trim or remove hazardous branches on a homeowner's property that are damaging a structure. And then the third component of our funding we use to provide application assistance for the SHAP program. So I consider the Department of Aging the feeder pool for the SHAP applications that go to community development. And we, in 2020, received more than 490 applications at the Department of Aging for the SHAP program. So we have 2 staff people funded by CDBG funds that assist with application assistance. You've heard for years that that's a lot of documents an older adult needs to collect to be able to apply for the program. And we want to be helpful to that. So that includes home visits, that includes helping them copy bank statements, that includes helping them complete the application, doing as much as we can over the phone. And then we deliver what we believe are good applications to Commissioner Jackson and her team. And I say we as though I have a role in it, but I want to give a real shout out to the team at the Department of Aging, Jennifer Rossich, who's here in the office with me, and her team, and all of our geriatric outreach workers who are out every day getting these documents, make these applications as whole as we can get them to bring them to community development. And in year 2020, we provided 113 what we think are good applications to the pipeline for CD then to take over and fully vet. I'm proud to say this year, I believe we had an increase in SHAP applications because of the work of the Healthy Homes Specialists. They were able to get that application out to more individuals in a year when we didn't have as many outreach events. We had to be really creative with the ways that we reached people. So we did, in addition, a lot of robocalls to older adults to let them know about the services. So the funds that Aging has from Commissioner Jackson's budget, Director Wacker's that they spoke of, is on page 17, it's $280,000. And I will say that primarily these funds go to the salaries and benefits for 9 staff people in the Aging department, 6 who are out cutting grass, raking leaves every day in city trucks, and then 3 people who work in the office, a coordinator of our chore program, and then 2 geriatric outreach workers who are assisting with that application for both the tree and the SHAP program. There is a $10,000 component of that budget that we use to purchase things like bags, rakes, mowers, leaf blowers to help us with this. I will note that we are currently hiring 2 part-time seasonal positions. Grass cutting season will be here before you know it. So individuals watching who know people who would be interested in a seasonal position in the Department of Aging, look at the Department of Human Resources webpage. The application for the chore program, I will let you know, is going out Tuesday, February 16th. I'll deliver to your office paper applications as well, but we have more than 1,600 individuals who've already requested them. And so with that, I'll turn it back over to Commissioner Jackson.
Does anybody have any questions on what Director McNamara just presented on Councilman Bashir Jones and then Councilman Blaine Griffin?
Sorry, I put up the wrong thing. I mean, I put up the wrong hand.
Oh, the wrong finger. What? Okay.
Chair, this especially during this time that we're in, there is nothing more important that we can be doing than to ensure that our elders are being taken care of. And this department is probably one of the most important departments, especially during this time. And despite the good intentions, the great intentions of the amazing people that work there, a lot of my residents, a lot of the elders have a lot of concerns with communication. And I know that it can be very overwhelming. So as we approach this budget hearing, what I would really like to hear from the director is, what does this department need to be successful? As I was going through the budget book, I see, we have, this many walks and this many this and this many that. But what we're finding is that I have elders who are really at no fault of the department, are passing away, man. They're just passing away. Many of them don't have family. They don't have any friends. And what's happening is we're opening doors and we're finding grandmothers who have passed away. We're finding grandfathers who have passed away, who live in these big homes and don't have anyone that's checking up on them. One of the great things that I love about this department, though, is this program that they have where if the elder is a part of the program, it's like a health checkup, basically, where you call where there's a number that they can be a part of, and if they're not picking up the phone, somebody is sent there to check up on them. And I wish that we could increase that number dramatically, so that those elders who don't have children, period, or children that live in the city, that they are able to be checked up on. So what I would really like to know from the director is, what does this department need in order to move on a very high level? What are the resources that you need, whether it's financial, whether it's more people working, or what, like, how do we increase it? Because during this pandemic, we have to make sure that our elders are being looked after. And one elder called me, my auntie Joyce. She lived in the lives of Bryant. And she called me, you know what she said to me? She said, "Bashir, I'm sitting here in this apartment. I need for you to give me something to do. I'm sitting here, I'm depressed. I don't know what to do." And so I gave her some things to do, and we laughed and we chuckled, and now she's excited. So we have to figure that out. So to the director, what can we do as a city for your department to increase the efforts and to increase the productivity?
To the chairman, through the chairman to the councilman, the first thing I would say is, if in every newsletter you do, if you could include the Department of Aging's phone number, I think there are a lot of residents who don't know that our department exists. So you mentioned the Cleveland Care Calls program. And so every day throughout this pandemic, Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, we've been in the office and connecting people to both the services of the city. But I would say, Councilman, an important piece is our role is to connect them to the entire network. You mentioned Eliza Bryant, what a role they play in the community. And there are so many of us in what's called the Aging Network that was formed with the creation of Medicare, that we get funded by the Area Agency on Aging. My department gets about $450,000 a year in grant dollars in one piece of this. So I think part is making sure that older adults know there's this network. The Department of Aging can't address every need of a Cleveland senior just based on the numbers. There's more than 80,000 of them. So we have to count on the network to be able to help us. Places like the Fatima Family Center who are doing home delivered meals. So making sure that people have our phone number and are calling us, and that we can connect them to the resources. What I would comment about when I see applications for people who aren't eligible for home repairs, I look at two main reasons they are, and I think this gets to some economic stability, that either people are behind on their taxes for the SHAP program, or that they are over income. And so increasing the economic stability of Cleveland seniors is a critical issue. And I think that's a conversation Director Wackers and I have had and are having and are aware of. But for those who get the Senior Homeowner Assistance Program, the SHAP grant, that can be really life-changing for their home. And so I always say in our department, we need to advertise like Coke still advertises, Pepsi. We need to be out. This year, we implemented more robocalls than we've ever done. We've made more than 65 different robocalls to seniors. The last one went to more than 90,000 households. So getting good phone numbers for us is critical, that then we can use that as a fast way to communicate with people. That's been critical in COVID. So those would be my initial comments.
So, you know, I think that, when a council person asks what you need, I think that you have to really, that's the moment that you say what you really need. And if you're saying that we just need to market in a newsletter, I don't work for the department, but I would step in and say, I'm sure you need more money. I'm sure you need more people, right? I'm sure it's not just more robocalls and more flyers and newsletters. I think that you need more people and resources, because particularly what you talk about in the chat program, many of my residents, even the process, you have, like you just talked about, you have to send people, they have to go to the apartments or homes of the elders, they have to collect papers. We're asking elders for information that they may not have, right? This tax return, that tax return, this. And if you know how our elders, they don't know, they don't keep up with things as much as, it's much easier for us. Whereas they have to go and get the paper and that paper and this. So we have to figure out a way to catch up with the times in regards to how we are communicating. And I think that if you're saying the answer is that we have to increase economic stability for our seniors, in order for them to be able to build and fix their own homes, that's a much bigger problem. I mean, that's a much bigger problem in the entire country. So that's not going to be solved overnight. And especially with the seniors that are reaching out, it's not like this is a population that is easy to get into the workforce. So we have to find a way that there's some funding. And it goes back to what Carrie said earlier. We have to find a way of taking funding that's not as restrictive and putting it where it needs to be. Let me tell you where it needs to be. We have to find the money, unrestricted dollars that can support our elders in fixing and building their homes. And not just them, but there's also young people who may not have money, right? We're why is it that we are, and I close with this, Chair, we're losing, as Councilman Polensek says beautifully, people are talking with their feet. People are leaving Cleveland. They're moving from Cleveland for better opportunities, for better jobs, for better weather, even though I think we have the best weather. They're moving for these different reasons. We can really change that. We can change that. We are the healthcare capital of the world, and we have to really promote our city in that way. So I close in saying to you that I think the department needs more money. I think the department needs more resources. And I believe that we have to once again go back to that conversation, Chair, about looking at the guidelines and how money is being distributed. But we have to be prepared as a city. We have to be prepared so that when we go to HUD, that we're not just saying, hey, we need more money, but that we are prepared to receive it. I think that's extremely important. So please, in closing directive, during this time, tell us what you need as a Department of Aging. Go through it. What do you need? What resources? What more of how we can make sure that our elders are taken care of at this time? And I just don't think newsletters is enough. I think you need more people. I think you need more money. I think you need more people answering phone. I don't want to speak ahead of you. Do you agree with that?
I'm sorry, Councilman, it cut out there. What was the last part?
I guess I'm saying, do you agree that you need more resources in your department?
Through the chairman to the councilman, I would just add that a significant investment in the age-friendly home investment program has made a real difference the last 2 years. And that's called the AFIP program. So that's the program that was $75,000 per ward. So when an individual isn't eligible for SHAP, we really look to see if we can fit them into the age-friendly home investment program. And so with the partnership with Community Housing Solutions, we've added an additional 250,000, 250 homes that have been completed in the last 2 years. We're currently in year 3. And so I think the programs we're talking about today, Community Development Block Grant, aren't the only home repair programs out there. And I think our role is to really try and match a senior with the program that meets their needs. And I think those can always use additional funding.
I got to work with the rep. I need you to ask for money. I need like for money.
Yeah.
You're too nice. But I would say to Director Wacker, I went through the budget. I went through each one, man. This department needs more money. I don't, and I would say, you guys are a part of the administration, having a conversation with the mayor. We have other resources in other places. This is one of the most important departments at this time. We have to show honor and respect to the elders who are the reason why the city is where it is. I would say, please look at the budget that you have right now for the Department of Aging is not sufficient during this time. I hope that you can relook at it and figure out a way to add some more finances and resources. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman, and certainly thank you for your passion. Just to, as the director said, she noted through our age-friendly initiative that council put together to bring additional funds. There's a significant portion of Department of Aging that's not in this CDBG line item. So what we're talking about, and hopefully we can keep most of our questioning to the CDBG portion, but we saw where folks like Roger Carney at Community Housing Solutions is able to leverage, which is a key point that we've been talking throughout the past couple hours, is leveraging resources. And he's able to bring, their organization is able to bring additional resources in that leverages it, but we can talk about more of that as we get to the...
Roger begs us for money every year. He doesn't have enough. It's not enough. So I'm glad you made that point. Roger was just begging for money. Roger is one of the best things that happened to the city, and he doesn't have enough resources to do. I mean, we know that there's not enough resources to fit the need. What I'm saying, Chair, is that we need to increase our vision. Griff, you know what I'm talking about, man. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Griffin?
Thank you. I get a kick out of this. It's because he's right. Roger is one of the best things that happened to the city, but it's funny when he says that because a lot of people do ask us for money, and we try to tell them, hey, we were tapped out. So, definitely can understand and appreciate that. Councilman brings up some great points about seniors and how we need to do a better job of looking out with seniors. A couple of things that I just want to ask is, how much time is the average time that it takes for a SHAP or RAW application to complete, or even our senior housing? How much time does it take? Do you average those things out? Do you look at how much time it actually takes to turn that around?
To the chair, to the councilman, yes, we do. We have a tracking system that tracks the number of days from the date that we receive the application until the day that we actually complete the construction. And so we are reducing the amount of time that it takes. And the greatest amount of time is spent in actually gathering the information from the senior to ensure that we are HUD eligible and getting the work done. So I would say, and I don't have access to my system right now. I would say for a SHAP, it takes us between 180 to 210 days to do a SHAP. And it takes us about maybe 260, close to 300 days to do a RAW. Before we get to those programs in the book, each one of those programs are funded with different funding sources. SHAP is CDBG and RAW is home. So each one of those funding sources have different requirements. So what I can do, if you wanted me to, is to get into some of the weeds and what's different about them and why they are different and what it takes for the homeowner to actually say that, yes, I will provide this, and then work on getting the documentation. But the amount of time, I think for this past year, increased as we were on our way down due to COVID, when individuals were not comfortable with us coming into their homes. And now that they are more comfortable with allowing us to come in, we are working on getting those jobs down. Presently in the SHAP program, we have 85 jobs that are going through the process, and we have 34 jobs right now with contractors. In the repair home process, we have 24 jobs that are going through the process. So each one of them requires a different eligibility requirement. And so we work on trying to do as much internally as we can so that the applicant does not have to actually do as much work now and getting the work done.
Okay.
Okay.
And if you could repeat those numbers one more time, if you could, and I think
Which numbers?
the
How many
24.
we have in the pipeline?
Yeah, in the pipeline.
Okay, in the pipeline, we have 85 SHAP, and we have 24 repair home.
Okay. All right. And that's citywide, right?
Yes, we are, in my division, we work citywide, we work first come, first serve, and let me rephrase that. We take all the applications in. So whomever is ready to move forward first, if you have all the documentation that comes in from the Department of Aging, and then we can move you. If you don't have all the documentation, then that process slows down because we have to now gather the information before we can move the project.
All right.
HUD also has a requirement that the documentation cannot age out. So that's another thing that we have to deal with. The documentation cannot be any older than 90 to 120 days, depending upon what it is, before we start construction. So if it took you a long time to get your information ready when you were in the information gathering stage, then we have to look at how that information is now aging to see how quickly we can move a project. What we have done, and this is also in response to, are we rethinking how we do things? We are developing a tracking system now that is tracking the documents as we put them into the system that shows us when they're aging out, so that we know that we got to get this job under construction, or this job has to have information updated before it can move forward, depending upon the place where it is in the timeline that we have in place.
All right, that's good information. Thank you. How many applications are ineligible that you get? I mean, what number do we look at that just don't meet the requirements? Do you have a number of how many people we're turning away? And then once they are turned away, who do we refer them to? Do we do a handoff to CD? Do we do a handoff to Community Housing Solutions? Do we tell people, like a lot of other people, to call your councilman? What is the process after that?
To the chair, to the councilman, that is a very good question with a very long answer. Our goal is never to turn anyone away. By the time the Department of Aging has done their vetting for an individual, we try to make that project go through. The same thing with repair a home, because we understand that for repair a home, we are making loans to individuals that are not bankable. And people are not bankable for many reasons. And the biggest reason is that there is insufficient equity in their property. So we try not to turn down anyone. So when there is a project that is, I don't have the number in front of me, but I can get the number. The biggest reason that someone would be turned down is they are over income, or the property exceeds what we can do. So one of the things that we changed last year for SHAP is we now do 2 critical repair items. Before, we only did 1. And we increased it to 2 because it's very difficult when a house has such deferred maintenance that when we go in, that we can only do the roof. For example, if the roof is connected to the porch roof, then we cannot do the porch roof and the main roof and not rebuild the porch. So we now do 2 items so that we can rebuild the porch, put on the porch roof, and then a roof actually includes the gutters, the downspouts, rebuilding or tuck pointing the chimney. It includes on the exterior of the home, if we have to touch the porch, we now have to put in a new electrical outlet on the outside. And so we have to do all of those things to make sure that when we leave, that we have a product that the homeowner can say that is complete, and we can close that permit. So now we do 2 items.
Okay. And excuse me for the technical, Mr. Chair, but we do have the Cleveland documenters watching, so we want to make sure we get granular on a lot of things these days. So thank you, Ms. Jackson. The other question that I have are trees on property. I'll be honest with you. I hope it's not a lot of environmentalists out here today, but sometimes I hate trees. We got more seniors that deal with trees that I've ever seen. And sometimes it's not on their property, but it's an abandoned property next door. How do we work on trying to help some of these seniors with their tree issues? Because you might have a property next door, or it may even be on their property that needs help. And to Councilman Jones' former question, do we have enough that we're putting into the tree program? Because I don't always get the results I'm looking for from the trees. And some of these seniors have trees all up in their drains that come from next door and other things. So how are we looking with those kind of things?
To the chair, we fund the Department of Aging for the tree trimming program that the director explained that we also partner with urban forestry in doing. But also, if we're going to put a roof on a house, then we want to ensure that the trees are not damaging the roof, or that the trees are putting all of these wonderful things into the gutters. So we'll trim a tree back if we're putting on a roof.
Okay.
Is that what you were referring to?
Yeah, that I'm referring to that, but also let me just get technical. If I live next door to a house and there's a big oak tree next door, a lot of time those branches are over my house and falling onto my property. And it's my understanding and looking this up that it's something called aerial rights, that if it's protruding over my property, then I have the responsibility and ability to cut those trees back so they don't fall and damage my property. Then number 2, a lot of the trees from adjacent properties are damaging the foundations or going into the sewer lines of seniors. So my question is, are we able to be flexible enough to deal with those kind of programs? Because I've gotten a lot of seniors that have said that they are not able to get services if they run into those kind of issues.
Through the chair to the councilman, the Cleveland Tree Assistance Program does not address any tree roots. So regardless if someone's income eligible, it does not address tree root issues. So to your question about neighbors and their tree touching their property, if a person is income eligible for the tree program, and those guidelines are the same as SHAP, and the tree is touching a structure or is dead or dying, they would likely be determined by urban forestry to be eligible to have it trimmed. So the role the Department of Aging plays is that we get the applications, process them, approve them financially, We then go out and visit the tree and the senior and figure out what the issue is. We then make a referral to urban forestry, who are really the tree experts, to determine what's the issue here. And if they determine it meets the qualifications, which that it's touching a structure that is causing damage, or in the future will cause damage because it's lightly touching it now and they're going to need a roof in 5 years replaced because of this tree, then that would be a qualification. Or if it's dead or dying. So it can be on their property or a neighbor's property if it's touching their house. I think one of the reasons maybe people aren't always eligible for it is because they don't meet the income guidelines for it. And so those would be my comments on the tree program.
All right, that income guidelines is really a tough thing. It's something that we really got to deal with at some point in time, because people get caught in that gray area, and it's almost like, we're really dealing with folks that just cannot afford it, but at the same time can't continue to let their house go and disappear. I'm glad for that clarification, because I think I was given some different information, and I'll look into that. The other thing I have is transportation, and Director McNamara or Commissioner Jackson. I know that Director McNamara, in the past, I've met with different transportation professionals. And even if we look at COVID-19, a lot of these organizations have challenges getting seniors to transportation. How are we funding transportation, and do we have the adequate transportation type of support in place to support seniors with that? Is that part of this as well?
To the chair, to the councilman.
Through the chair.
Go ahead, Director.
Oh, thank you. I was actually through the chair to the councilman. I believe Senior Transportation Connection and the funding for that is in a further day of your CDBG hearings, if I'm correct, Director Weckers?
Correct. It'll be under our social services.
Okay.
Presentation.
I'll defer that one until later. The other thing is around infrastructure and support for seniors. And I'm looking at a lot of seniors have to do their doctor visits online. A lot of seniors have to, their children want to check on them and be able to put their eyes on them. And I know broadband is a very important issue. Have we looked at technology issues? And I don't see that as one of the categories that we're trying to support. Or has the federal government started looking at how they can support through community development block grant dollars, seniors with technology issues?
So not specifically with seniors. I know this is an initiative that's really being driven out of the planning department with Freddie Collier. We have, for the first time, funded a program through the CARES Act with Digital C to provide access, specifically the families with children in Cleveland Metropolitan School District, to give them access so they can do online learning. But this has obviously become a much more critical issue nationwide. There is funding becoming more available at the federal level, not so much for the city level, but more for on the state and regional level. And then finally, there's been initiatives out of HUD that all new affordable housing products, multifamily or single family developments, should be wired for broadband so that those families have access to that digital infrastructure.
Okay, I would just encourage us, as we have these conversations of seniors as well and CDBG block grant dollars, that we always look at those kind of tools around digital or those kind of things as well. So that'd be great. These are also things we should always be gathering as we hopefully we get our next Secretary of HUD, that we let her know how important it is for those kind of things. Ms. Jackson, I wouldn't be me if I did not commend you for all the work that you did around lead. You've been a superstar around that, Commissioner. I appreciate that. Can you give us an update? I know Councilman Conwell is not on, but can you give us an update on how many homes we've done with that great lead grant that we've had, and how many we've done in that concentrated Glenville area, and also how we've done citywide regarding lead safe home or housing for some of the families? Do you have that? And once again, I commend you, because I know that that was your baby.
Thank you, Councilman. Well, the 2017 lead grant, we are on track to complete 100 and I believe it's 52 units that we have to complete by September 21 of this year. So we are on track for that grant. For the 2019 grant, we have all of the partners in place. We have started receiving applications because of COVID-19. We were pushed behind because of not being able to host all of the things that we had planned. So we did not have all of the community engagement meetings. So what we did do is drop off flyers in the community to the businesses. We have been working with NLI, which is a faith-based organization, to get information out to their membership and to the churches on 105, because the 2019 grant is the 4 census tracts that are in the Glenville area, and 105 is going almost right down the center. So we've gotten information out there. We are also doing an RFP to help open an office in the Glenville area so that people can come in and talk to us about the lead grant and what the lead grant can do. Right now, I believe we have 6 cases in the pipeline. We've done about 3. And so we need to get the word out more about those. And Councilman Conwell, who I have seen today, has been really good in helping us get the word out about the 2019 lead grant in the Glenville area. So what we are hoping to do is, as we send out more flyers, we're going to do another, what we call a drop, where we are giving information in bags from community development to individuals in the neighborhood, so that we can spur some interest and start conversation around the 2019 grant. We've also met with CHN, who is managing the Lead Safe Home Fund, and they they know our product, we know their product. So when they get someone that is in our service area, which we have a citywide grant and a targeted grant, then they will refer those individuals to us. And so we are working with them also to do that. And then the community engagement specialists that are in the Glenville neighborhood and citywide are also aware of the program that we have. And they are providing information, passing out flyers that were produced by the Cleveland Lead Safe Coalition and flyers that were produced by the city of Cleveland, so that we can get the word out about the funding that we have to help people make their properties lead safe. So we have a great deal of activity happening with the 2019 and the 2017 grant. We have a pipeline already for the 2017 grant that will exceed the number of units that we have to have. So in doing that, we are preparing ourselves to apply for the next round of funding that will hopefully come out probably before June of 2021.
So we got astray from the senior program, which
yes, we did.
Which where we were getting questions on, and I don't want to get too far off of that. If I can come back to that once we get to the lead section, Councilman, that would be great. And I know we're going to have a more comprehensive presentation on lead as required by the legislation that we passed. We have to have a full session on lead before March. I forget what day that is. So that's part of our legislation requirement. Next up, I had Councilman Joe Jones. Did you have a comment on the senior program that was presented?
No, I don't.
Okay, so
Mr. Chairman.
Okay, so yeah, so we're just got to the senior side. Let's finish taking questions for the senior presentation that just got made.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilman Bashir Jones. Did you?
No, I'm not finished. I want to ask questions, Mr. Chairman. So
regarding the senior section.
That's correct, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it. First, I just want to start out, Mr. Chairman, thanking the director, Mrs. McNamara, for doing such an outstanding job in our community. And I really appreciate it when I or my staff can call and be able to reach your people to help our seniors get work done in their neighborhood. So I just want to do a fast shout out to Teresa, who answers the phones and does a great job in being able to dispatch us where we need to go, depending on what those issues are. I really appreciate Loretta Stiles and her commitment and dedications with helping with homeless prevention. And Alicia Merriman, who is your supervisor over your social workers. I really appreciate the work she does when it comes to doing follow-up and accountability to make sure that the people are doing the programs up to specs for our senior citizens. And I just want to, just take the opportunity to shout out to Jeremiah Greathouse. There was a couple of times we had issues with grass cuts not being done properly. He was Johnny on the spot and was able to help us with technical information on where we are and where we were in terms of funding. And I really appreciate the fact that he jumped down to help one of our seniors repair some work in their homes. So I just wanted to shout out to those people. If I forgot some people, I please forgive me. I think Shaniqua Caffey also works in your office too, so she does a wonderful job. So if I forgot some folks, I just ask them, please forgive me. Don't take it out on my senior citizens. We do have one of the biggest and largest senior populations in the city of Cleveland, and my line of questioning would probably be somewhat down the same line of questioning that Bashir Jones had. So I want to go right on into it because the time is of essence. What is, Director, what is the total number of employees that you have currently in your department?
Through the chair to the councilman, with these community development block grant funds, this funds 9 of them. In total, right now I have 39 employees, not funded general fund grant and community development block grant as part of that.
And Mr. Chairman, to Mrs. Mary McNamara, so total, you have 9 that's being funded out of block grant and 39 employees funded out of what department? Is that general fund?
To the councilman, 39 is the total. So 9 are CDBG, and then it's 30 that are funded between a mix of those Ohio Department of Aging grant funds and general fund dollars. Okay. So I can be prepared at our general fund to really lay that out for you, the difference between where employees fall in. This is just, today is just for primarily chore employees.
Okay.
Jeremiah that you spoke of, and our employees that work on SHAP and trees before we give them to community development.
Okay. And then, Mr. Chairman, just going through the various different programs that you have that's funded up under, I would presume, what we have allocated here for $5 million. These are the various different programs that we have. And the proposal for this year is 2021 allocation of 3.5 million. Is that correct, Mr. Chairman? Is that what the director is asking for?
Yeah, that's through the chair to the councilman. This is the community development budget. So Director Wackers can speak to that. I have my line item is $280,000
for the senior side. Correct.
Right. And Councilman, we never got to this because we started asking questions. So I was going to go through the budget for my division.
Okay, well, I'll hold, and I'll just restrict it to once you've gone through your budget, distinguished gentle lady Commissioner Jackson, then I'll just focus everything here with the deference of the chair to our director, Mrs. McNamara, on aging, if that's okay, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
All right. So, Mr. Chairman, moving forward with the budget, I noticed that in the lead hazard control.
Now we're gonna, I'm sorry, Councilman, I thought you said we would come back once we go over the budget. We were trying to get through the questions on aging.
Yeah, that was the part of the questioning. Is aging a part of the lead program in any format or form?
Through the chair to the councilman, aging just promotes the program. We don't have any specific role in it. We just get that information out to homeowners.
Yeah, and the only reason why I asked is I saw it here as it was commingled in, and I didn't know if we had had done anything with that. So it reads on page 3.5, it gives a different impression. So I just wanted a clarification. So you really pretty much don't do anything with that program. And Mr. Chairman, as we look through these pages here, we have repair a home, and I see in Ward 1 we don't have anything there. I do.
Yeah, we'll get to that when we get to that section.
Oh, so we're not in that section now?
I was just asking questions on aging right now.
Oh, just strictly just the department itself, not on the programs.
Correct.
Okay. So then, Mr. Chairman, dealing with, so what are we dealing with? Just for clarification, what are we working on? Because I don't know.
Aging right now.
Right. So we're dealing with repair a home program.
She went over the summary of the chore program and the programs that aging had through Director McNamara.
Right. So are we dealing with senior homeowner assistance program, Shap?
That's what we just went over. Correct.
Right. So these are questions I have for those programs.
For the seniors, for Department of Aging. Go ahead.
All right. So I got the green light to move forward. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the question would be, Mr. Chairman, for the repair home program, and one of the things that Bashir Jones talked about is the difficulties of being able to fill those applications out and to navigate that. Can you talk a little bit more about that and how successful or how maybe not so successful you are with being able to help our seniors? Because I know that a number of senior citizens have been on those programs and have been difficult for them to navigate.
To the chair, to the councilman, Repair a Home is a loan program designed to assist residents with repairs to their property. It is limited to a 1 or 2 family dwelling. And what is unique about Repair a Home is that Repair a Home is funded with home funds, and the individual must address code. My inspectors are not code inspectors, but we write our specs so that we can address any code violation that is in that property. So what we provide to the applicant is what is on page, it is a priority scope of services that we provide, that we walk through with the applicant, the things that we can do. So under the priority scope of services, we will address your mechanical systems in your roof, your heating, your electrical, your plumbing, your gutters, your downspouts, do lead hazard reduction work. We will address exterior code violations for painting or tuck pointing or siding, stairs, railing, and porches, doors, chimney tuck pointing. Then we do kitchens and bathrooms. And then we'll do others, which is repair of a walkway or a driveway, and exterior carpentry as needed. Any building or housing code violation has to be dealt with first. And so we bring the mechanical systems up to code. Now, the thing about Repair a Home and the regulations in which we operate is that Repair a Home is not a selective rehab program, meaning you cannot select to address one code violation and leave another. When we leave the property, all code violations must be addressed. So there should not be any code violations when we do the sign off on this property. The other thing about the federal regulation is that if we spend more than $25,000 in a property, then we have to ensure that we have addressed any lead hazards. So that's why we we utilize lead hazard control measures. For instance, a lead hazard control measure, when we do lead abatement, has to last for at least 20 years. So under the repair a home program, normally we would do vinyl siding as opposed to painting the exterior of a property, because most painting does not last for 20 years. And so we do replacement of the roofs. You will get a new bathroom if we go in to do the plumbing. And in most cases, the homes that we are in have already experienced some deferred maintenance. So if the base cabinets are deteriorated and would be a code violation, then we would replace all of those things. We spend on an average of about $60,000 in a repair a home unit. And 50% of that 60,000 is forgiven after 5 years of occupying that property by the original applicant. The monthly repayments are based upon the applicant's ability to repay. So we offer deferred mortgages, principal repayment, 1%, 2%, all the way up to 3%. So we are the best deal in town for a loan to a low income individual that meets our income guidelines.
Well, Mr. Chairman, that was really comprehensive. So it was more than what I bargained for. So it was thorough though. So I must admit, so it's going to be really difficult. No wonder I have a 0 by that mark in my area. But what the programs that I'm most interested in is the SHOUT program, and Mr. Chairman, to the director, how far are we? I mean, how many people are we have on the waiting list of that program right now?
To the chairman, to the councilman, we have 85 people in our pipeline, and I don't consider that a waiting list. The pipeline goes from the people that are in one category, which we call income eligibility. And so we're gathering all that information, and then we go to the process where we have to bid the job out to obtain a contractor. Then we go to the phase where we have to have a pre-construction conference where the occupant, the contractor, and the inspector will meet to determine when the work will start, when the work will end, and so that the homeowner can ask all of the questions that they're asking. And then we have the fourth phase where we are under construction and paying the contractor. So we have 85.
So Mr. Chairman, of those 85, is all 85 spots right now under the current program totally fully funded? Is it fully funded so right now, do we have any extra that's left in there after the 85 has been satisfied?
Let me rephrase after we build a job out is when we know how much that job is going to cost. And that's when the chief will say that this job is eligible. Then we certify the funds and put the funds in place for that particular job. A job that has not been bidded out, we use our average to project out that this job with two critical repair items now is going to cost us between $16,000 and $24,000. And we use that to determine as a placeholder for this individual, because we would not want to commit to a person that we're going to do a job and we don't have sufficient funds in which to make that job happen.
So right now we don't know the answer to that. So we're not sure. You gave
I'm sorry. She did give the answer that they're all funded.
Right. They're all funded.
It is all funded. So then how much money do we have left over in the program was the question, Mr. Chairman, to the commissioner.
Just to chime in.
And if you don't know, we can come back.
Let us come back to that.
Yeah, I have other quick questions.
Okay, sir.
Kind of quick questions if we could.
So the Department of Aging?
This is concerning the Department of Aging programs that we have in front of us.
Okay.
This is on page 3.1, section 3, talking about the programs.
Yeah, there's the senior homeowner assistance program. That's what we were talking about.
That's correct. And is that, and that would include furnace, hot water tank replacement?
No, those are all other programs outside of senior programs.
Okay, well, I got questions for those. So
So we'll come back.
I'll wait till we get into those programs. That way we stay on track, Mr. Chairman. And I appreciate the 4 minutes that you've allowed me to speak to the commissioner. Thank you.
Okay. Any other, so we got Councilman Charles Slife on the senior program.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm looking through the write-up on page 3.2, and to the Director of Aging or the Commissioner, the annual income limit for a single household is $18,650. Do you have handy the average income that participants are bringing to the table? Certainly that's the cap, so the average is going to be less than that.
We have to report to HUD, Councilman, and I would be glad to get you the exact numbers. The 18,650 is 35% of median. Most of the individuals that come through the SHAP program are making probably less than $1,000 a month. So that's like 12,000 a year. So most of our people are low income as opposed to low income. But I can get you the exact numbers because we do have them. I just don't have them here with me.
Okay, I appreciate that. That's about ballpark. That's what I would have guessed. Director McNamara, you had mentioned one of the challenges or one of the causes for applicants getting denied from the program is delinquent taxes. I would presume pretty confidently that we can't use public monies to help people pay delinquently owed public monies, but what resources are out there to help people that need to become tax current, aside from payment plans or otherwise?
Sure, through the chair to the councilman. So in 2020, January through December, we had 41 individuals that were denied in aging for SHAP because they were behind on taxes. And so all 41 of those individuals got referred to our Economic Security Project, which is our partnership with 9 other entities to provide economic case management to families. We were so that referral happens, and they engage with partners like ESOP and legal aid and consumer credit counseling and appraising, so folks who can really get at the deeper financial issues.
And anecdotally, is that typically kind of a payment plan model, or are there actual resources? If someone is delinquent $3,000, that $3,000 can be brought to the table to be made them whole instantaneously?
For the most part, they are trying to add other resources into their budget. There are a couple of loan programs through Hebrew Free Loan that can assist with back payment of taxes, as I understand it. But we're also looking at making sure they're signed up for like Medicare savings programs. So if someone's eligible for that, it would add an additional $106 back into their monthly income. So it may not be directly related to taxes, but if we can increase other income coming in, that then could be put towards a tax payment plan. So being on a tax payment plan is required if you're behind on taxes to apply for SHAP. You don't have to pay it off in total to be eligible for the SHAP program, but you do, as I understand it, Commissioner, it's 3 months of being current on a tax payment plan to then have us move the application forward.
So thank you, Director and Chairman. Something that I think is worth us investigating once we're beyond these budget hearings. I guess a quick anecdote. When I worked for the administration, I was working with a senior in a Cleveland neighborhood who, for many reasons, owed about 6 figures on a mortgage. And the house was worth about $17,000, and her income was about $250 a month. I was able to go to Wells Fargo and get them to realize the absurdity of all of this. And if you were to evict a senior citizen, there's a strong chance that the building would end up becoming blighted, demolished by the city of Cleveland. And just at the end of the day, the institution wasn't going to get its money back. That's just not how the math worked. So we could talk payment plans, we could talk this, but the better option was just to recognize the situation we were in and walk away from it. And from that experience, I have to say, I worry that whether it's delinquent utility bills or delinquent taxes, relatively small amounts, to what degree do we unintentionally contribute to abandonment, blight, and ultimately the city having to incur expenses to demolish buildings, maintain vacant properties? The cost of that, when we could have just addressed what's a couple $1,000 delinquent tax issue and keep the senior in their home. We have a lot of programs out there to help defray the cost of large development. We have, tax abatement for new construction, but there doesn't really seem to be something for senior citizens who are just a little bit behind, no astronomical number. And when we're talking about low income residents who qualify for a program like this, making $12,000 a year, to start talking about payment plans and other resources seems to not be addressing the root of the problem. And I would just hope that there's some way that we can maybe put our heads together, look at the data, understand to the degree to which this is or is not contributing to many of the other expenses we're having to absorb in other parts of the budget, and see if there's just a more comprehensive, better solution that saves the city money and helps Cleveland residents live in their homes for as long as they can. So if that's something I'd like to look at moving forward, if any of the colleagues would like to join me, I think that it all can be held back to or applicable to this program and other ways the city spends money.
Yeah, and I think Director McNamara can speak at some point. We can have a session about this, about the kind of the entire age-friendly community that she's been working on. These are ongoing issues that they've been facing in her department on how do we keep people in their homes and how do we keep them safe in their homes, which, as the commissioner spoke about, if we go in there and touch it with a dollar, we touch the whole property. We can't avoid any of the other, we can't just put on steps to keep a senior able to get out of their home. We have to deal with all the components versus some of our sources where we can, just do some things to keep them as safe as we can in their home or be able to get in and out of their home. So that's the ongoing challenge that we face.
Thank you. Yeah, and if we're able to come up with ways to incentivize new development, I think that we can probably, that the idea that a delinquent utility bill or delinquent taxes is just, we got to throw up our hands and say, we can't do anything about that as well. I'd push back against that rhetoric, and with that, I'll yield.
Yeah. Thank you. Councilman Hairston.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My hand was raised from earlier. I had a question on the point around the discussion of the lead grant in Glenville.
I couldn't get a breath in there to get that point on, so I apologize.
No problem. So I just like to go back real quick. Just touch on that for a second. I know previously that the lead grant in Glenville was south of St. Clair. Is that correct? Is there anything regarding the lead grant that has taken place north of St. Clair in the area of East 105th down to East 88th Street?
Councilman, to the chair, to the councilman, I do not have, well, for one thing, I don't know north, south, east, and west. I have a sense of.
No, from St. Clair to the Shoreway is north, yeah.
Okay. I know we are going down 105 and we hit the, when we get to the East Side Market there, we're a little bit out of our area. And then when we go over to Catholic Charities, we're a little bit out of our area. If we're on 105, we're Lee Memorial, the funeral home,
okay,
Greater Abyssinia, then we're in our area. I think the street is Hale. You go down that way. We're in our area, but I can get you the map that shows exactly where we are in those areas. We have driven the area. I have to see it visually. So we've driven, we got to drive it again so that we can see exactly where we stop and where we end. but we're
Sure.
trying to do as much as we can in the 4 census tracts and immediately around those 4 census tracts.
Okay. Well, great. Thank you, Commissioner, through the chair. Yes, if you can provide that, I like to look at that because I'm going off of memory from the previous map that those census tracts were situated between, it was south of St. Clair from like 88th to 110th, I believe, and did not include the areas north of St. Clair in that lower East Glenville area and also including where Councilman Blinzig and I both represent as well, that, has a tremendous amount of high lead levels in those areas and properties that, would need some attention also. So I'll look to that and maybe, finding ways that we can, I don't know if it's a matter of including those areas on the grant application or what those requirements are to include those other areas of Glenville that have been impacted by this issue of lead as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Councilwoman Spencer on the aging program.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just wanted to clarify, I've heard my colleagues, the very poignant piece about the income restrictions. It's come up several times where folks are saying that's a challenge when folks are in a gray area just above the age limits. But I just really wanted to make sure I really understood through the chair to the director that or to the commissioner that these are HUD imposed. We do not have any flexibility. These are imposed by HUD, and is there anything the city can do to provide some flexibility with those income limitations?
To the councilman, to the chair, to the councilwoman, what my director, Director Wackers, and I have been discussing is how do we look at if we increase HUD, if we increase SHAP from 35 to 40, what impact would that make on the allocation, and how many people would that add to being eligible to the program? So in order to ensure that if we now add another 50,000 people, are we able to now service that 50,000 people? So we are going to look at the 35% median. We went from 30 to 35, and now we'll look at going from 35 to looking at how that impacts our budget for the SHAP program. And the fact that we now do 2 critical repair items at each property. And we are doing 2 critical repair items because if we didn't, we would have to turn people away because the properties were so, have cases of severe deferred maintenance.
Yeah, just to add on to that, Councilwoman, through the chair. Yeah, the threshold is really a local decision as a program design to limit, to create a pipeline that is manageable and serve the lowest in need seniors. We could increase it, but the pipeline would become much larger, and we don't have exactly the dollars to match that increase at this point in time. It's not, but we are looking at what our options are, but we have to do it carefully so we don't reduce the level of service, as the commissioner said.
Thank you. I look forward to hearing about what you learn and as you look at that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Bashir Jones, a question on aging.
Thank you so much, Chair. And that's the point I wanted to make. We've been talking about HUD, and I was having some dialogue with HUD as I've been sitting here. It's not HUD, it's the city. It's not HUD. The guidelines that we've been giving is not HUD. The guidelines that's being given is based upon the city can make a choice on the restriction or the increase. Is that correct, Director?
Well, Councilman, to the chair, there is a hard limit of 80% of AMI. So we could go up to 80%.
Which 80% AMI? I mean, we're talking about the whole city. We live in an impoverished city. Okay, so everybody would fit the guideline. But what you're saying is, which you've made that decision, and I respect I don't appreciate it, but I respect the fact of what you've done, which you are increasing or decreasing based upon the amount of services that you can give, right?
Mm-mm.
Are you saying no, Commissioner? That's exactly what you just said.
So Councilman, just, so
And
we
no,
have had,
no, excuse me. This is my question to you. My question is, does the city have any leeway to increase or decrease the guidelines that we are giving to residents in the city? Does the city have any leeway in that?
so the city does have leeway to answer your question directly regarding the SHAP program. Other programs.
I'm talking about the SHAP program. I'm talking about the program in which majority of the people who are coming to us as residents are needing help with their houses. Earlier, with all due respect, Commissioner, because I really have respect for you, but I'm speaking on behalf of the residents who take 6 months just to do an application, okay? 6 months just to do an application. And don't let it be where most of our elders who they can't find certain paperwork, they have to go back and then have to go back. The need is much greater than the resource. The need is much greater than the resource anyway. Okay, even if we had $1 billion, it would not be sufficient to what we need to do. It will help more. So we know that the need is greater than the resource. Okay, we all agree on that. But it seems as if the process that's in place is only to make things harder. So what the commissioner said earlier was, well, we want to fix the whole house. So if the roof is messed up, but there's a tree there, but then we got to get the tree done in order not to get the roof. And then if the roof is not like this, then this is like this, and then this. There's so many different things and parameters that you're putting in place that what's going to happen? A resident is going to say, you know what? Forget about it. Forget about it. You're putting me through all of this mess because you don't want to give me the money. So just forget about it. And you know what's happening? People are not only are people who have resources leaving the city, which is in turn decreasing the amount of population here, but on top of that, there are people in our city who don't have the money to move. So they are dying and they are subconsciously angry and they don't have anyone to help because the very people that should be able to help is telling them, come back with this information, come back with that information. The very people who are living in their golden years, they're living in a sense of stress because every night they are getting, there's leaks that's coming through their roof. But you know what we do? We have tax abatements. We find the money for developers. We find the money to bring new homeowners. And this is what fuels the idea of gentrification. This is what fuels it because the city is creating hoops that don't need to be there. They don't need to be there.
Yeah,
Please, Chair, because this is very important. Because
right, yes.
We need to look now. I'm not going to stop. We need to look at the process.
I'm not asking you to stop. I'm asking you to understand a clarifying point. Tax abatement does not come out of this budget. That's not something that.
That's why I don't want you to interrupt me. I'm not talking about that.
You just talked about it. You just said tax abatement as part of this.
The point I'm making. Listen, I have more development going on in my neighborhood, okay, than many other places, okay. So I have a right to say what I'm saying. I know that the city finds money where they need to find it to bring new development into neighborhoods. Okay, what I'm saying to you is that the resources that are available for residents who are in need, my residents can't leave, Chair. This is not good to you. You're a great man. You're doing great. But I need you to hear what I'm saying. Okay, my residents, there's some who don't have the money to leave. They can't leave. So they are living in homes that's dilapidated. The commissioner said earlier, well, listen, there's some people whose homes are such in bad shape. We can't even give them no money because they're behind in taxes, because the house condition is in such disarray. So what you're really saying to me is you don't even have a plan to give to them because they can't catch up on taxes. They can't catch up on fixing the home. They can't catch up. So they're going to forever be in a perpetual state of generational poverty. Because you and I both know, and this is the issue with redlining, this is the issue with government programs that have harmed Black and brown people, is that the best way to pass on wealth is through homes. You and I both know that. The best way to pass on wealth is through homes. So now, if you have a home that's behind on taxes, that has less equity than what's needed to fix the home, are you passing on wealth? Absolutely not. You're just passing on debt. So now Black and brown people are just passing on debt, and the city is not putting anything in place to assist them. So what I'm saying is that we need to truly look at the process and stop saying that somebody else is the reason why. No, what is the city doing? What is the administration doing? How can we change the process? Because the majority of our city are poor, okay? The majority of the people in our city are poor. So the city has a way. Commissioner said it takes 5 or 6 months just to get through the shop, just the application. Forget getting the work done, just the application. So then how long does it take to get the work done? I've been in for 4 years, Chair, and guess what? The first year, I've had residents who applied for the first year and still don't have the work done. So we need to look at this process, really go through the process and figure out what part is it the federal government and what part of it the city. Because I would argue that the city plays a major part and they are deciding. Let me say to make it public. The city is deciding who gets the resources or not. It is our fault. It is no one else's fault. It is the city's fault when I have a grandmother in Ward 7 who has been waiting to get her roof fixed, and I can't help her one bit because they tell me that she has too much money, or she has too many taxes, or her home is in such disarray that it can't be fixed. And what the hell do I tell her? What can I tell her? Besides saying, you know what? You're gonna die in this state. What can I tell her? What can I tell her? The change, Chair. And what I'm saying, it's the city's fault. And what is the city gonna do to change it? That's my question.
So through the chair to the councilman, I can appreciate your position entirely. In terms of making decisions about our program design, we share that with the council and the administration when they're developed. These program designs have been in place for a very long time. Should they be reevaluated periodically? Yes, certainly. I think what we do try to do at the end of the day is try to uphold this concept of having low barriers to entry, where whatever program we do, we try to make it as barrier-free as possible. Now, can we eliminate all barriers with this pot of money? Unfortunately not. And I know day in and day out, Commissioner Jackson's staff and the staff at Department of Aging really try their best to help these seniors.
Director, would you be open to traveling to my community and meeting some of these residents who don't have the money to pay off their taxes, don't have the money to fix the tree that's next door, they don't have the money to do it, and I want you to hear them in front of them. I want you to hear them that they have been working and trying to get money from this SHAP program for years and they can't get it. Can you come to my community meeting and can you express to them, because they think it's my fault, they think it's me, they think that I'm the one keeping it like that. Would you be open to speaking at my community meeting and discussing with them the process, not the process, forget the process. The process is flawed, okay? It's flawed. That the city makes the choice to increase and decrease who gets the funding. Would you be open to doing that?
Commissioner, through the chair, I make myself available to other block groups or community groups. I'm happy to do so for you.
Thank you. You don't even have to respond to any, because it's clear the statement. So thank you. We're going to set that up. Thank you.
Councilwoman Santana, you had your hand up for a moment.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just going to bring up the income guidelines, and I wanted to also know if there was a way that we could, increase the income cap, and because there's just a lot of working poor that, just kind of fall through the cracks, and they are in need of help. So I think Bashir Jones, Councilman Jones, really expressed, what many of our council members believe, that we just kind of need to think outside the box so that we could help, our residents. But you know what, now that you've actually called on me, so just fairly quickly, considering, and this is through the chair, and maybe this is through Director McNamara or Commissioner, considering that there's many residents, applicants that do not have the documents required for the SHAP application. I'm curious to know if there's, all the money is spent by the end of the year, or is it there's a balance left that we must return?
I mean, I could jump in there. I think it was spoke about earlier. Certainly, the issue of having caps and ceilings also drives is what limits help keep us to be able to manage the precious resources we have. Because we never have money left over, as Commissioner Jackson talked about. You know, the 85 applications that are in queue, we earmark those dollars so that we have the resources to be able to meet that obligation as those get approved and as they get bid out, et cetera. So, you know, my general understanding is each year the SHAP program, the CHOR program, all those Department of Aging programs, we cap out very early because there's such a high demand, even with the limits on the income. I'm not sure, Director McNamara, if you want to jump in on that point as well.
Thank you to the councilwoman through the chair. For the SHAP program, the funds for it really come from community development, so I can't speak to that. They just pay for staff in the Department of Aging to assist with application. What I would say that is critical, I think that the role we play is one-on-one assistance for seniors in working with their application. So currently, I have 164 seniors that have an application pending. It means they need documentation, can't even go yet to community development. And so I think that's the role we play that's critical, is this is one-on-one. You have one person you're working with to help complete your application. Related to the CHOR program, that program does reach capacity, but we have in the last several years utilized other funds to be able to stretch the number of people we can serve. So we have a contract with Court Community Services that's not included in this budget here. We have a contract that we put out to bid with that's open to the public to bid on, that's not included in this budget. And then we utilize and partner with any council person around casino funds if they want to add more dollars. We know that the dollars for the CHOR program in this budget don't cover the entire need out there. That need, is always growing, but we have expanded the CHOR program.
Okay, so just for clarity, I'm sorry, just to understand, the CDBG dollars that go is allocated to staff, but then the repair dollars come from HUD grant, right? Like for housing? I'm just wondering, is that two pots, different pots?
I'm going to defer to Director Wackers or Commissioner Jackson.
Yeah, sorry, Commissioner, go ahead.
There are two different pots of money, but they're both CDBG money. Both come from the CDBG grant.
Okay. So what you're saying, Commissioner, is that normally we don't have a carryover balance, like we spend everything by the deadline date?
Yes, Councilwoman.
Okay, got it. And so, thank you. And Chair, and I'm not sure if this is the right time to talk about it. I want to talk also about contractors. As I'm trying to increase, Latino contractors to work with the repair program, I'm just curious to know, is there any training? Is there any type of communication that is shared so that, minorities have the opportunity to work with these programs? And maybe my last question is, do you have enough contractors to do the work for the repair program?
Through the chair to the councilwoman, the answer to the last question is no, we do not have enough contractors. And there was a question I do recall being asked by one of the council people, what do we need to be successful? We do contractor training. We train contractors for many, many years. So we train them within the HUD requirements, and we train them for the state of Ohio requirements and for the city of Cleveland. So we have presently about 16 contractors. What would really help are contractors that follow through with the requirements that the grants cannot pay for. The grant cannot pay for your license certification. The grant can pay for your training, but it cannot pay for your license. And so many contractors go through the training, and the training classes are between $500 to about $1,000, depending upon what we're training them in. And then they don't follow through and paying for the certifications. So a contractor has to be certified as a lead abatement contractor, registered with the city of Cleveland, and they also have to be a certified by EPA, which is RRP. The EPA certification is $500 for 5 years, and the lead abatement certification for the state of Ohio is about $500 for 2 years. So it would really help to have some, other than federal funding, to help pay for those type certifications.
Thank you, Commissioner. And through the chair, if you could, Commissioner, send me some information, maybe by email, when those trainings are taking place so that I could share with our community.
Okay. Yes, I would do that.
And when we get to OEO during our budget hearings, there's a pretty comprehensive training programs that the city runs, and they can give a broader overreach of how contractors can be engaged. So.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I think we've pretty much exhausted our questions on aging.
Mr. Chairman, I have one more question.
On aging?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Barcia Jones did a wonderful job in really bringing this out, because this was a subject matter, and I'm not going to beat it to death, is the process. And I wanted to kind of go there with my line of questioning, was how difficult it is to be able to access that SHAP program. But now that he's brought out the information, and the director, Mr. Wackers, is in an agreement of what he's saying, I think that, as a council, maybe we should look at, how more flexible can we be with this particular program for our senior citizens, given the fact that we have the ability and capacity to shape it more than what we thought we had. Because, Mr. Chairman, I thought that the certain requirements from the federal government was just like block written in stone, and that was it. And it comes in that way, but it doesn't seem to be that case in this program, and maybe in others. So I would, Mr. Chairman, with your leadership, suggest, do we have flexibility? What are those flexibility parameters in the program, and how we can make it so that it's not so encumbersome to go through this process? Because there's seniors who are in my neighborhood who just have like given up, and we need to be able to offer some level of hope. So I guess, Mr. Chairman, to Mr. Wackers, is there somehow we could have a discussion, talking about this? Maybe a group of other council members may want to sit in on the session and talk about how flexible or not so flexible this program can be for the citizens in the Lee Harvard Ward 1 and throughout the city of Cleveland.
Briefly through the chair to the councilman. We are always open to having discussions about this. It's invariably a discussion about trade-offs. And without, yes, we could raise certain requirements to make more people eligible, but then we need to see what our resources are. And resources really is two things: the funding, but also the contractor pool that we can actually put these services through. Now, can those be solved? Yes, but it's going to take a lot of work. So,
Mr. Chairman, I really appreciate the Director Wackers. You're putting that out there, and you're giving us that piece, and the whole piece of colleagues like myself, Barcia Jones, and Jasmine Santana, is how do we make $1 out of 15 cents, right? So how do we think outside the box of the existing programs we got? How can we partner with our financial institutions and banking institutions to set up opportunities for our senior citizens that could be right along in tandem with this particular program, and being able to have an investment back into our communities in such a way that would have, as you stated earlier, a bigger, more profound impact in terms of having others come in and invest. So some of our banking systems, Mr. Chairman, to Mr. Wackers, can certainly put together programs and new initiatives that can truly help our senior citizens. I would be interested, Mr. Chairman, of course, with the deference of your leadership, to sit on such a committee to talk about how we explore the opportunities to see what parameters we can use in the existing program to expand it for more seniors to get involved, and how do we work with our partners in the neighborhood, our financial institutions who are willing to invest back into the very locations they have their businesses in our communities to help our senior citizens. So I would be open to that, Mr. Chairman, and certainly want to put it on your radar screen, Mr. Chairman, and to the director, Mr. Wackers. How do we think outside the box? How do we make what we have really work in a dynamic way? Sort of like some of the things that they're doing now in Pittsburgh. And I also know about the Baltimore model too, but I'm more impressed with the Pittsburgh model. So I would be interested, Mr. Chairman, to explore it a little bit more deeper, if that's possible, with your leadership as being the chairman of this committee. And even though, Mr. Chairman, I don't sit on your committee, I am really heavily interested in how we serve our seniors and how we serve our citizens in the city, and how we use these programs to truly give hope and offer a sense of direction and path of improvement in our existing territories. So with that, Mr. Chairman, if Mr. Wackers has any comments about that, or any suggestions, or maybe had thoughts about it, and maybe there's something else that we may not know about right now that's on the horizon, I would leave the floor open. And Mr. Chairman, I have no more questions on this particular subject matter. And thank you for the deference of the chair for allowing me these couple of minutes.
Thank you, Councilman Jones. And we certainly can look at and have broader discussions as we go throughout the year on how we raise additional resources and how we leverage the banking relations. And as was spoken earlier through the commissioner, most of these are folks who are unbankable based on other conditions. So we are kind of the last resource for some of these folks. So we can certainly look at that throughout the year and put that on our list of future topics. With that, since we've exhausted aging, thank you, Director McNamara. We are going to take our break and then come back and hit the rest of these programs at 1:30. Please keep you can keep your screens on. We're not signing off. Very similar to our as we do finance and council meetings when they go from one session to the next. So Director Wackers, thank you for the robust morning session. A little bit into the afternoon session, but these are great discussions about how we move our city forward and serve the most need that we can with the precious resources that we have. So we are going to break at this time and then come back at 1:30. Thank you all.